Chapter 872. Zhua Chun and Lu Wan thought that no one knew about their plan. What they didn't know was that someone had been hiding in the meeting room and listening to them. So, their ultimate goal is to make our leader fall in love with that Zhua Chun guy? Then Zhua Chun will slowly figure out our leader's background so that he can take over our base? Qiu Lily widened her red eyes and looked at Elmar curiously. Elmar nodded with a gloomy expression. She didn't expect these people to be so daring and greedy. They actually wanted to take over their new base. Do they know about the situation at the plantation? Qiu Lily asked again. Right now, their base's secret was not only the zombie base, but also the plantation base. They had to keep it a secret as much as possible. Elmar shook her head and said, their attention is currently focused on the second base and how to seduce the leader. They don't seem to have the chance to pay attention to the plantation. In other words, they had only been here for a short period of time and didn't have the time to pay attention to the plantation. Moreover, Wuxian plantation was quite a distance away from here. Now Qiu Lily and Elmar had gathered all the zombies outside the base and surrounded the entire cultivation base, not allowing anyone to approach. They are now secretly gathering information everywhere. One look, and you can tell that they are not a group of good people. Elmar continued. I don't know what happened to Qiao these few days. She has been staying in the space. Qiu Lily frowned worriedly. Elmar sat at the desk, writing on a piece of paper with a pen in her hand. I'll write this down first, and send it to Brother Tianxing and the others secretly. I want to see what they plan to do. Oh, Qiu Lily replied. Elmar wrote down Zhua Chun's plan into several copies. Then she stealthily sent the copies to Yuan Tianxing, Lin Feng, Lin Wenwen, and the other people involved. These people are looking for death. Lin Wenwen held the paper and stared at it. His face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. What a big appetite. Aren't they afraid of breaking their teeth? Long Qingying said expressionlessly. On the other side, Lu Jun sneered when he saw this. TSK, I'm so busy. How can I be in the mood to play with them? Duan Wan looked at the contents of the paper and sneered. What a bunch of idiots. Do they think they're easy to bully? On the other side, Lin Feng silently sent a message to Chen Yuding. Old Chen, someone is trying to poach your woman. Do as you see fit. Chen Yuding, who had only dared to touch Shen Yuzhen's little hand and had never been able to hug his lover, was so thirsty that he wanted to eat her. Hee. Yuan Tianxing's handsome face carried a faint smile as he said, We've been pretty busy lately. Why don't we watch their show and relax? Lin Feng glanced at him. You want to play with them? Yuan Tianxing gave him a strange look. Isn't the one playing with them your sister? Lin Feng. Why did he ask such a stupid question just now? Zhua Chun and the others, who did not know that their scheme had been exposed, immediately began to look for candidates. They spent a few days looking through the first batch of people who joined the Universal Survival Base and the second batch of people. Duan Wan is a strict woman. She was in the Special Forces before. I've never seen her like any man in the Netherworld King's base, so I don't know what type she likes. Lin Wenwen seems to have heard that she likes people like Yuan Tianxing. I think this one is suitable for her. The few of them began to discuss suitable candidates. The men they chose were all somewhat capable, good-looking and charming. Then they distributed the candidates according to the type that Duan Wan and the others liked. However, they did not know that their actions were being watched by the people in the Universal Survival Base with great interest. It was as if they were waiting to watch a good show. Oh, isn't this the captain of the 6th team? Junjun, look, your candidate is here. Lin Wenwen looked at the candidate, who was preparing to attack Lu Jun with amusement. Lu Jun looked at that person's name and said expressionlessly, I wonder what benefits they gave this captain of the 6th team. I know. A level 5 corpse core. This captain seems to be preparing to advance. Shen Yuzhen came over and said, I say you guys have to act properly. Don't be discovered by others. It'll be awkward. Yuan Tianxing couldn't help but say when he saw that they seemed to be very excited. At the bottom of the space lake, Lin Xiao still didn't know what was going on in her base. She had been unconscious for more than 10 days. Lu Tianyi, who was in the space, began to look at the lake from time to time. His eyes flashed with uneasiness because his sister had been down for too long. He knew that the lake had a therapeutic effect on her, so the longer Lu Tianyu stayed in the water, the more serious the problem might be. At this time, Lin Xiao's body was wrapped in the gentle energy at the bottom of the lake. This energy gathered in her mind, mouth, and lower abdomen to form a ball. At this moment, the energy in her mind began to overflow and slowly poured down toward her heart. When this energy came into contact with the energy ball in her heart, another wave of energy rushed down from her heart to Lin Xiao's abdomen. Finally, all the energy in her body stopped in the position of her lower abdomen uterus. However, at this time, Lin Xiao still had her eyes closed and hadn't woken up. When Lin Kuei brought Lin Jing and a group of zombies from Qingshan Base back to Universal Life Base, he strangely found that the surrounding zombies had disappeared. Because Lin Jing's health wasn't good, Lin Kuei and the others walked slowly. It took more than half a month to walk from the western border to Universal Life Base. As soon as they arrived at the periphery of the base, they were discovered by Xiedong's men. Soon, Xiedong also received the news and told Yuan Tianxing and the others. They're here? Well, let's ask Xin Yuzhen to arrange their accommodation in the second base. Yuan Tianxing asked Xiedong to let Xin Yuzhen arrange this matter after hearing the news. However, he still brought people to the west gate of the base to welcome the people from Qingshan Base. This time, the leader of Qingshan Base was Hudaba. There were no humans in this group of people, they were all zombies. There weren't many humans either, only 50. Moreover, they were all level 4 to 5 zombies. Hudaba had a big beard and sunglasses on his face. He didn't look like a good person at first glance. They didn't enter the first base, but directly went to the second base from the outside. Therefore, the humans in the base still didn't know that a group of foreign non-humans had come to their base. After Lin Kuei saw Yuan Tianxing appear, he separated from Hudaba and the others and brought Lin Jing into the first base to take her to the check-in area. Chapter 873. A few days later, she saw the man in front of her. Lu Jun resisted the urge to roll her eyes, but put on a fake smile and said, "Excuse me, what can I do for you?" She had seen the man in front of her before. His name was Hua Antong, and he was the 6th squad leader of the 3rd Brigade of the base's security guards. He was a level 4 ability user. He was tall and strong, and although his facial features weren't very handsome, he could be considered a little handsome. Moreover, his temperament wasn't bad, and his smile was very alluring. Hua Antong smiled and said, "Chief Lu, there's something I need your help with. Is it convenient for you to have a cup of tea together?" Lu Jun directly smiled and refused. "It's not convenient, I'm very busy. If you have something to say it now." Hua Antong didn't expect Lu Jun to reject him so directly, and his expression froze for a moment. But he quickly reacted and still smiled. "It's okay. I'll wait for you when you have time." After saying that, he left just like that. Lu Jun meaningfully looked at his back, and also turned to leave. On the other side, Duan Wan acted as if she didn't know anything about the people who were secretly observing her. There are a lot of zombies at the foot of the mountain. In order to avoid being discovered by the people of Universal Base, we didn't dare to move. So we didn't go in to check. But we all turned around and didn't see the planting field. From what I heard, that piece of land is in Wu Mountain. Someone wanted to check the situation at the planting base, but found that it was surrounded by a dense group of zombies, and there was no way to go. Not only ordinary zombies, but there were also level 3 and level 4 zombies guarding the high ground. They didn't even have a chance to climb up a tree and use binoculars to check. The people in the base were still busy with their own things, and Lin Feng took Lin Wenwen, Long Qingying, and Li Zheng out to collect supplies. The area near the base was basically swept clean by them, and now every time they left the base, they had to go further to collect supplies. Yuan Tianxing continued to build the wall of the second base, while secretly watching the new batch of survivors. As for the zombies from Qingshan Base, they would drink a cup of the unknown liquid sent over by Universal Base every day. The transparent liquid was clean and tasteless, but it had a fragrance that attracted zombies. Elmar told him that they had to drink it for at least 3 months. and drink it every 3 days. Only then would their faces recover a little. Hudaba wasn't in a hurry, and he calmly brought his zombies to live in the unfinished second base. Wuxia was still staying in the universal base, but he would run over to their leader's private residence every now and then. Lu Jun brought the data report of the cultivation base into Lin Xiao's office. He placed it on the desk and walked out. As a result, he met Xiadong face to face, and the two zombies almost bumped into each other for the third time. However, both of them reacted quickly and stopped at the same time when they were about to collide. Then, they looked at each other in silence for 2 seconds before nodding at the same time as a greeting. After nodding their heads, they prepared to pass each other, one on the left, one on the right. When Lu Jun moved to the left, Xiadong moved to the right at the same time. After coming to their senses, the two of them moved to the other side at the same time. After going back and forth 3 times, the two of them, "Hey, what are you two doing?" Xiao Lily, who was passing by, looked at the two curiously. Lu Jun smiled helplessly. "Nothing." As she spoke, she took a step back and made way for Xiadong. Xiadong's expressionless face flashed a trace of embarrassment. He didn't say anything and walked in with his long legs. This was already the 3rd time, right? Every time, it was at this door. Xiao Lily looked left and right. She felt that the atmosphere between the two of them was a bit different. "Oh right, did that person attack you?" After thinking for a while, she couldn't figure out what was going on between the two of them. So Xiao Lily put this matter aside and asked Lu Jun. She was asking Hua Antong. A strange light flashed in Lu Jun's eyes and he nodded. He said a few words. "It seems that they are preparing for a long battle." The person from Sister Wenwen's side also sneaked into their fundraising team. "It seems that they are preparing to attack during this mission," Xiao Lily said as she twirled her long hair. "It must be. I guess that person will definitely choose to stand up when Wenwen is in danger. Do you believe it?" Lu Jun smiled at her. Xiao Lily nodded. "I believe it. Even if Lin Wenwen wasn't in danger, she had to pretend to be in danger. If the other party wanted to take the bait, she had to throw some bait." After saying that, Xiao Lily turned her head and looked at Lin Xiao's office. A trace of worry flashed in her eyes. Their leader had disappeared for more than half a month. It was too long. It made people feel uneasy. Lu Jun saw her eyes and knew what she was worried about. He sighed in his heart. It was useless to worry, they couldn't help. The expression on Wu Qingyue's face became colder and colder. The longer the female zombie went in, the lower the pressure around him became. But even if he was worried, there was nothing he could do, he could only wait. But it was this feeling of waiting that made people more and more uneasy. The dark side of their hearts was getting bigger and bigger. At this time, in an industrial area more than 10 kilometers away from the base, a group of psychics were running away in panic. They weren't being chased by zombies, but a few powerful mutant beasts. "Xiaojiang, be careful," a woman cried out in alarm. A 17 or 18-year-old girl was out of stamina and accidentally tripped and almost fell to the ground. She almost fell to the ground. At this moment, a huge mutated dog bared its teeth, opened its mouth wide, and jumped more than 10 meters into the air before pouncing towards the girl. The girl tripped and almost fell. At this time, even if her brain reacted, she couldn't control her body freely. She wanted to turn over and avoid the huge dog falling from the sky, but she didn't have the strength to do so. Jiangxi opened her eyes wide and looked at the dog pouncing towards her with its mouth wide open in despair. Bang! Boom! Just as Jiangxi was about to use her special ability to avoid this crisis, a huge concentrated fireball suddenly smashed into the giant dog's body. A figure quickly flashed to Jiangxi's side, hugged her and rolled to the side. Roar! A wadash! The huge dog was hit by the fireball and fell to the side. But it was safe and sound and shook its fur, then roared at the human who threw the fireball at it. Quick! Go! When Qinyu rolled to the side with Jiangxi, she quickly got up and protected Jiangxi behind her. Sister Yu. Jiangxi breathed a sigh of relief. Xiaojiang, I'm sorry, it's sister's fault. Qinyu looked at Jiangxi with some guilt. Almost, just a little bit more and Jiangxi would have used her ability. For Jiangxi, it was better not to use her ability. Chapter 874. At this time, a gust of wind blew from the side, blowing the huge dog that was about to pounce on them to the side. "You two don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go." A man on the other side shouted at the two sisters. Qingyu immediately pulled Jiangxi and ran forward. At the same time, she threw a fireball at the huge dog. At this time, a white shadow suddenly flashed from the side. With a flash of sharp light, it pounced towards the two. Meow. This white shadow that was even bigger than a normal large dog let out a strange piercing cat cry. It was fast and swift, waving its sharp claws and pouncing towards the two. Bang! Qingyu quickly raised her hands to block. A wall of fire bounced the white shadow back. After using the wall of fire to block the mutated cat, Qingyu immediately turned around and pulled Jiangxi to continue running. Bang bang bang. The sound of gunshots came from behind, but they didn't know if they hit. Hurry, the uptown area is not far ahead. Hold on a bit more. Qingyu pulled Jiangxi to continue running, but Jiangxi's footsteps were weak, and her breathing was messy. Her round little face was already somewhat pale, and her other hand tightly pressed against her chest as she ran after Qingyu. It seemed that as long as the hand on her chest loosened, her heart would explode. Meow. After the mutated cat was bounced back by the wall of fire, it immediately rushed forward again. Its originally sky-blue gem-like eyes were now filled with red light. Two sharp teeth came out of its short mouth, and it fiercely chased after Qingyu and Jiangxi, attacking crazily. Qingyu was a tall beauty in her 20s, with a height of at least 1.7 meters. Her slightly curly hair was tied into a ponytail behind her head, swinging back and forth as she ran. Her legs were slender and powerful, and a tight belt wrapped around her slender waist. A beautiful but fierce face, with a dignified expression, swept over the huge cat chasing behind them. Looking at Jiangxi's pale face, Qingyu suddenly stopped, and then bent over sideways. She picked up Jiangxi, who was only 1.5 meters tall by the waist. "Sister, you put me down, don't worry about me." Jiangxi was shocked when she was picked up, but she quickly resisted in a panic. "Little Jiang, don't move." Qingyu carried Jiangxi without much effort and ran agilely with her long legs. It did not slow down at all. "Don't worry, we'll get there safely." As she ran, she comforted Jiangxi. Because she was carrying the girl, Qingyu was unable to use her ability. She could only dodge left and right to avoid the fierce white cat's attacks. Bang! Gotcha! The big white cat scratched the broken wall beside it with its paw, and the wall immediately broke into small pieces. Just as the big white cat was about to continue chasing after the two, its face suddenly changed. Its ruthless eyes moved away from the two and looked in another direction in confusion. Then it sniffed with its nose, and something seemed to attract it. Then, the big white cat suddenly let out a long howl. It turned around and left Qingyu and Li Rulin behind as it dashed in another direction. After it made that sound, the other cats around it immediately followed it and rushed over there. Only a few level 5 and 6 mutated dogs were still in place attacking the others. Qingyu and Jiangxi discovered that the crisis behind them had suddenly been resolved, and immediately found a place to stop and rest. "How are you? Little Jiang, are you okay?" Qingyu knew that Jiangxi's body was not good. Now that she was running for her life, it caused a lot of damage to her body. Jiangxi's ability was very special. She could not absorb any external energy, so every time she used her ability, it consumed her own energy, which was her vitality. So it caused her body to become weaker and weaker at a young age. Jiangxi took a few breaths and waited for a while before the pain in her heart subsided. She nodded with a pale face. "I'm okay." Strange, why did they suddenly run away? Qinyu's beautiful eyes had a trace of heroic spirit, and she looked in the direction of the mutated cats with doubt. Jiangxi patted her. "Sister Yu, let's go quickly. There are still a few mutated dogs." However, their crisis was not completely resolved. Qingyu immediately pulled her up, and this time Jiangxi wouldn't let her carry her no matter what. Although she was small and skinny, she was still less than 70 kilograms. But letting Qingyu carry her would still cause her to be obstructed. On the roof of a building in the distance, a zombie silently stared at the movements of these people, and then quietly disappeared. inside the base. If you have something to say, just say it, Captain Hua. Lu Jun looked at the man who once again blocked in front of her, and very patiently said to him, It's like this. Recently, there may be some bad elements eyeing our cultivation base here. In order to keep the base secret, I hope you can cooperate. Hua Antong said to her with a smile. His smile was very sincere, and it was easy for people to believe his words. Thank you. If it's about this matter, this is what I should do, not help. Lu Jun nodded. She looked at him with some surprise. She didn't think that in order to get close to her, he would even betray those people. She felt that those people might die of anger if they knew about this. Lu Jun inexplicably wanted to laugh. Then can we talk for a while? Actually, this is not within the scope of my responsibility. I've already overstepped it. It's not suitable for the captain or other colleagues to know. Hua Antong said with some distress. Lu Jun looked at him for a while with a somewhat blank expression, as if she didn't quite understand his intentions. Finally, she hesitantly nodded. Okay then. She walked to a place where there was no one and asked curiously. Although I don't know why you suddenly told me this, I still thank you in advance. Do you know who it is that wants to find out about the cultivation base? Hua Antong followed behind her. His eyes secretly flashed with a hint of joy. Lu Jun's attitude was now a little more relaxed, which meant that he could take a step forward. He said with a smile, My job is to protect the safety of the base. I only heard about this information, but I haven't confirmed who it is. So I want to ask you to cooperate with me to find out who it is. Oh, is that so? Then what do I need to do? Lu Jun nodded, not fully understanding. Hua Antong said with a smile. No, you don't need to do anything right now. At least wait until I say you can do it. Then I'll teach you how to do it. Okay. He smiled very kindly, as if he really wanted to help Lu Jun. Lu Jun thought about it, and nodded in agreement. Okay then. Then that's it for now. By the way, it's best not to let others know that I came looking for you. We don't want to alarm those people, and let them be on guard. Hua Antong thought for a moment and reminded her. Okay, I understand. Lu Jun nodded again. Hua Antong smiled and left. Chapter 875. Although Hua Antong and Lu Jun had met several times and knew each other, they weren't familiar with each other. At most, they only exchanged greetings. Hua Antong was trying so hard to get close to Lu Jun for a level 5 zombie core. He couldn't let Lu Jun feel strange, so he told her about the actions of Swordsmanship and the others. In fact, even if he didn't say it, Hua Antong knew that the base would find out soon. He was just using this as an excuse to talk to Lu Jun. He had investigated and found out that Lu Jun had been dumped by a scumbag because she had a son. She was probably traumatized. If he wanted to move her, he could only start with her son. However, Lu Jun's son was often with the base's princess Lin Xiaolu. The two of them were always accompanied by a group of bodyguards. It would be difficult to make a move. He didn't notice it before, but now that he took a closer look, he realized that Lu Jun wasn't bad looking. She also had a gentle temperament. She was the kind of woman that would make anyone want to marry her feel at ease. On the other side, Swordsmanship and the others later found out that Xin Yuzhen had a boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a level 6 psychic Chen Yuding. Although Chen Yuding was not the official deputy leader, his position in this base was also very special, and it could not be considered low. He was basically below the deputy leader and above the others. After weighing the pros and cons, they decided to give up on Xin Yuzhen, a woman who already had a boyfriend like Xin Yuzhen. Therefore, they decided to transfer the information they wanted from Xin Yuzhen to Duan Wan. Therefore, Swordsmanship and Lu Wan decided it was better to kidnap Duan Wan and use all kinds of methods to force her to talk. She used to be a special soldier and was trained to extort confessions. Maybe it won't be of much use if we kidnap her, someone said hesitantly. Did you forget that old Dan is a psychic? Old Dan is about to reach level 6. He can deal with Duan Wan. Lu Wan smiled carelessly and reminded them that there was a psychic in the team. That person was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up. Then he remembered. Oh right, I had forgotten about that. But she stays in the base's government building every day and doesn't go anywhere. It's a bit difficult to capture her quietly. Then we can only do it in her dormitory. In Lin Xiao's space, almost a month after she went to the bottom of the lake, there was finally a sound. Lu Tianyi, pesticide, and the others were still working in the field. He habitually turned his head to look at the lake. Suddenly, he felt a familiar sense of oppression slowly rising. His eyes lit up, and he immediately stood up and stared at the lake. The energy mass at the bottom of the lake was slowly disintegrating, and not long after, the female body was revealed. When Lin Xiao opened his eyes, he was in a daze for a few seconds before regaining consciousness. She blinked, remembering the situation she was in. But in the next second, she frowned because she felt that something was wrong with her body. Sliding her hands upwards, she swam out from the bottom of the lake. Then she swam to the shore and stood up. But as soon as she poked her head out, she stopped moving. Something was indeed wrong. Lin Xiao frowned and stuck his hand out of the water. His face darkened. Good. She couldn't feel the energy core in her brain anymore. His body could not feel the flow of energy, and his palms could not release any special abilities. Not even a trace of black fog could be released. What was going on? Her other hand under the water touched his abdomen, not knowing if it was an illusion. She felt that his abdomen was a little bigger. Of course it was not an illusion, because she had been in the water for almost a month. But Lin Xiao didn't know how long she had been in the water. Lin Xiao looked up, and then found out awkwardly. She didn't have any special abilities now. How could she go to the shore? The zombies in the small building were staring at her. Looking at the clothes that had been neatly folded on the chair, she was speechless for a few seconds. Turn your face away. Lin Xiao was now more than 200 meters away from those people. Of course she wouldn't yell at them to turn their faces away. She could only silently say one sentence in her heart. Then, this sentence appeared in the minds of Lu Tianyi and the others. Lu Tianyi looked at Lin Xiao in the distance in a daze, and subconsciously turned his face away like the other zombies. After he finished this action, he realized what was wrong. That's right, the voice just now was ringing in his mind. It wasn't heard by his ears. Telepathy? What skill was this? Seeing that all the zombies in the field had turned their bodies in unison, leaving only rows of their backs for her to see, Lin Xiao was stunned, a little confused. But even though she was confused, she still quickly came out of the water, grabbed her clothes naked, and then disappeared by the lake. When she reappeared in the next second, she was already in the forest next to her. After putting on the clothes, Lin Xiao found that the clothes seemed to have been washed. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Just as she put on the clothes, there was a whooshing sound coming from the side. Lin Xiao turned her head to look, and saw a mushroom as tall as a person running towards her, while swinging its umbrella. There was also a tall black dog next to it. Woof! A woo! Awang was very happy to see Lin Xiao. It immediately rushed towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao moved sideways, avoiding its huge body, and let it fall on the ground next to her. Looking at the giant snake chasing behind her, she turned around and walked out of the forest. Don't mess around. Awang obviously heard that when she said these two words, she was a little bit not in the mood. After being stunned for a while, it suddenly obediently followed Lin Xiao's legs and walked out, not caring about the other companions. Lin Xiao really wasn't in the mood to play with them now, because she was trying to feel the energy in her body, but she couldn't feel anything. It was empty. She raised her palm in front of her, but the little black flame couldn't be released, and the black smoke couldn't be released either. What was going on? After walking out of the forest, Lin Xiao looked at the grassland that had changed a lot. The grass that was originally a meter tall was gone, and it was all dug up. Now there were paddy and wheat. There were also other beans and vegetables that were neatly taken care of and full of vitality. Seeing Lin Xiao walking over with a big dog, Lu Tianyi, and the other zombies stopped what they were doing. The mushroom spirit and the giant snake didn't follow her out. They just stopped at the edge of the forest and watched. Just now Lu Tianyi opened his mouth, and his voice was hoarse, but with a sense of coolness. When he spoke softly, his voice wasn't very unpleasant. Why did you all turn around just now? I don't think I said anything. Lin Xiao also opened her mouth curiously. She just said one sentence in her heart from afar, and these zombies acted as if they heard it. Chapter 876. Lu Tianyi looked at her with a strange expression. Didn't you tell us to turn around? Lin Xiao. She looked at Lu Tianyi, then looked up at Mo Yan, who was standing by the window on the other building. She became silent. Lin Xiao nodded and returned to the living room of the small building. In the past month, because of her, Lu Tianyi and the other zombies could easily get close to the lake to draw water. Now that she came out of the lake, she couldn't. Lin Xiao looked around and found a new pond between the lake and the field. It wasn't big, about 200 square meters. The pond was connected to the other side of the lake, leading the water from the lake into the pond. Oh, I dug it with them these days. Otherwise, except for you, none of us could get close to the lake, and it would be inconvenient to use water. Now that there are more and more crops here, the water consumption is also increasing, so we came up with this idea. Lu Tianyi saw Lin Xiao's gaze on the pond, so he explained. Lin Xiao nodded and didn't say anything. She turned around and flashed out of the space. If she could close her eyes to look outside before leaving the space, she would find that she couldn't see anything. He would only see a white fog, and he would no longer be able to see what was outside like before. So when Lin Xiao came out and saw the ruins in front of her, she was stunned. Her first thought was, shit. Did her base get blown up again? How long did she stay at the bottom of the lake? She turned around in disbelief and found that she was on an abandoned street. Dust and sand covered the collapsed houses and the environment. It was desolate and uninhabited. There were also many tall and strange trees growing. If this was in the base, these seemingly dangerous mutated trees would have been cut down a long time ago. Where is this? Lin Xiao realized that at least she wasn't in her base. She felt relieved, but at the same time, she was confused again. What the hell? Why did she come to this strange place? Wasn't she supposed to appear directly in his room? Where was this? Could it be that the way she appeared was wrong? Lin Xiao was confused, but she didn't think and flashed into the space. Yes, the ability to enter and exit the space was still usable, but how could the location of the appearance deviate from the original location? After entering the space, Lin Xiao closed his eyes and looked outside. In the end, all he saw was a thick white fog. After coming out of the space once again, Lin Xiao looked at the surroundings that had become different from before. His expression was a little stunned. So the place where she came out of the space had become random? I can't locate him? With this thought in mind, Lin Xiao once again entered the space. When she came out for the third time and saw the unfamiliar environment, she confirmed this thought. Lin Xiao began to search for information about his surroundings. At the very least, he had to figure out where he was. Old and faded shop signs, or road signs that had fallen to the side of the road and were covered by sand. An hour later, she knew roughly where she was. At least it wasn't far from uptown, but it was still more than 10 kilometers away. As for why she suddenly appeared more than 10 kilometers away, this might be related to the current condition of her body. What the hell? Forget about his ability malfunctioning. Even his space malfunctioned. Should she be glad that she could still enter and exit the space freely? She raised her hand and found that she still couldn't use her ability. She had now become a zombie that couldn't use her ability, just like Mo Yan's situation. But other than her ability, her body's skills were still there. At least jumping to the top of a 7-story building wasn't a problem. Lin Xiao jumped up from one building after another, and finally stopped on the roof of a building that was more than 20 stories high. He sensed the surrounding air for a while. She smelled the scent of the base, the scent of the people in the base coming from afar. But other than the scent of the base, Lin Xiao turned her head and looked in another direction. She flashed into a room on the side. She couldn't be invisible now. She could only look for cover. Soon, there was a movement in the direction she was looking at. Roar dash, a beast-like roar came. Boom, boom dash, the energy attack of the paranormals caused a huge sound. A group of paranormals was being chased by a few level 5 or 6 mutated dogs. These people's breath was messy, and their energy was not enough. But the breath of the mutated beasts was very manic, chasing these paranormals without letting go. Lin Xiao silently observed the situation of these paranormals. There weren't many of them. More than a dozen people. Their bodies were full of the smell of blood. More than a dozen men, protecting two women in the middle. One of the girls was motionless, being carried by a strong man. It seemed that she was unconscious. Quickly hide in that building. A man pointed at the building where Lin Xiao was and shouted. Everyone quickly rushed towards that building. When they rushed downstairs, Lin Xiao silently withdrew her gaze. The mutated dogs chased over, but stopped at a place more than 10 meters away from the building, revealing a vigilant look. They stopped, rushing into the door of the building. Everyone just found a cover to hide their bodies, ready to find the stairs to go to the second floor. Suddenly, someone found that the mutated dogs that should have rushed in behind them didn't follow them in. Turning around, they were surprised to find that they all stopped outside. The mutated beasts outside the building stopped outside, but some of them unwillingly took a few steps forward. Their manic eyes blankly looked at those people. They wanted to go in, but an inexplicable feeling of fear controlled their bodies. They didn't dare to take another step forward. Danger! The mutated dogs all had such a warning in their hearts. Finally, a less courageous mutated dog seemed to be unable to resist the aura that made them afraid. Silently retreated a few steps, turned around and ran away. As soon as it retreated, it immediately affected the emotions of other companions. In fact, these mutated dogs had already gone crazy, but in a situation where their minds were not clear, they were still dominated by instinctive fear. This showed that their premonition of danger was still very strong. After a while, the mutated dogs restlessly stepped a few steps in place, then all turned around and left. Why did they leave? Seeing the departure of the mutated dogs, the people hiding on the first floor were somewhat at a loss. These mutated dogs had chased them for 20 or 30 kilometers, and suddenly left without any reason, making these paranormals even more vigilant. These mutated dogs had already gone crazy. The only thing that could make them retreat was instinctive fear or oppression. Even these level 5 and 6 mutated beasts were scared, so it could only be said that there might be something more terrible than these mutated dogs in this building. Chapter 877. Hurry up, let's get out of here. Let's go. After seeing the mutant dogs leave, the paranormals thought that there might be something more terrible here, so they couldn't stay any longer. Lin Xiao stood in the house on the roof and watched the mutant dogs run away in fear after sensing her breath. She also watched the paranormals run out in fear, quickly heading in the direction of the base. She had restrained her breath, so the mutant dogs must have smelled her. Her breath also contained an element of danger, so they didn't dare to come close. Lin Xiao didn't jump down from the roof until those people were a distance away. After thinking about it, she entered the space again and took Ah Wang, Dahe, and the mushroom spirit out for a walk. When she came out with the 3 mutant dogs, they were no longer in the original building. She took out an off-road vehicle and got into the driver's seat. Although she couldn't use her superpower, and she couldn't locate the entrance and exit of the space, but she had no problem taking out and putting things in and out of the space. She didn't have any superpower now, so her attack power was reduced by at least 60%. With the physical attack power of her current body, although it wasn't very dangerous, it wasn't suitable for her to stay with strangers outside. So when she smelled someone from afar, she would take a detour and leave. Fortunately, every time she came out of the space, she was not far away from the place she came out last time, at most within 20 kilometers. This time, after coming out with the 3 mutant dogs, she had run from the Gongju district to the West Lake district. Looking at the dense woods around her, she didn't drive far before she put the off-road vehicle away. She had no choice, because the road was impassable. The original road was covered with all kinds of grass and vines, and there were also branches sticking out from the side. Otherwise, there were big holes or cracks blasted by the mutant beasts fighting with each other, so it was impossible to drive. Lin Xiao could only walk with her legs. Woof woof woof. Maybe because he hadn't come out to play for a long time. Ah Wang ran around excitedly as soon as he came out. He ran from the left to the right, and then from the back to the front. He was having a lot of fun. Even Dahe, who was lazy, raised his head excitedly and ran around in the grass in the woods. As for the ADHD mushroom spirit, she was even more excited. Just like Ah Wang, they couldn't stop at all. Woof 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 woof. Not long after, Ah Wang ran to Lin Xiao with a black mouse that was half his size. Looking at the big rat, Lin Xiao was speechless. Was this guy trying to tell her that they hadn't eaten meat for a long time? Lin Xiao licked his lips as he smelled the scent of food coming from the rat. A sense of hunger arose. Indeed, she had not eaten for a long time. All right, this one is enough for me. If you want to eat it, go get it yourself. Lin Xiao asked Ah Wang to put down the struggling level 3 mutant rat, so that they could catch their own prey. Actually, when Ah Wang brought the mouse in front of Lin Xiao, the other two had already rushed to the other side to catch the mouse. That's right, when Lin Xiao came out of the space this time, he directly ran to the zoo. However, it didn't land in the group of rats. Instead, it landed not far away from the group of rats. Lin Xiao looked at the big rat that Ah Wang had thrown onto the ground. The rat wanted to run away as soon as it landed on the ground. Lin Xiao stretched out a finger and flicked it with its sharp nails. Puff! The level 3 mutant rat's head immediately fell off. The headless body moved its limbs for a while before it stopped moving. Lin Xiao walked over and looked at the big rat. The level 3 rat was already as big as a medium-sized dog. The black fur on its body was shiny, smooth, and clean. There was a faint energy in its fur. It was also because of the energy that the rat didn't grow any parasites on its body. After digging out the energy core of the rat and holding it in her hand for less than 2 seconds, the energy core turned into powder and scattered from her hand. She dragged the headless corpse of the rat and found a clean spot to start skinning it. While skinning, she used her nails to cut off the meat piece by piece and threw it into her mouth to eat. It was tender and delicious. The raw meat was also a bit soft and chewy. As a zombie, Lin Xiao either didn't eat at all or ate a lot when she did. Moreover, she didn't know if it was because of little man, but she couldn't stop eating. Although the level 3 mutant beast didn't have a lot of energy in its body, the energy made the meat very delicious. While Lin Xiao was quietly eating the raw rat meat, the other three had begun to wreak havoc at the edge of the rat herd. After the second virus outbreak, the huge rat herd that covered thousands of acres was bitten to death by the crazy mutant rats. After so many days, the rat herd was not as dense as before, and the area it covered was no longer just thousands of acres. Now from the zoo, the huge rat herd occupied at least 5 or 6 square kilometers. However, Lin Xiao still didn't know about this because she had been unconscious for almost a month. She didn't know how fast the rat herd was spreading, but according to her current position, she had already reached the edge of the rat herd, which was a few kilometers away from the zoo. Dahe silently shuttled through the dark forest, its pair of cold eyes tightly staring at the level 4 mutated rat in a group of small rats in the distance. The level 4 mutant rat was bigger than a large dog, and it seemed to weigh more than 100 kilograms. The fur on its body was smooth, black and shiny. It didn't notice that it had been targeted by its natural enemy, the snake. At this time, it was pouncing on a mutant deer and gnawing on its meat. The surrounding low-level rats were a few meters away from it, not daring to get too close. Just then, the level 4 mutant rat suddenly raised its head and looked around vigilantly. After finding nothing unusual, it lowered its head and grabbed a bloody bone with its 2 front claws, putting it into its mouth and gnawing on it. Kacha kacha. Just as it lowered its head and gnawed with relish, a black shadow suddenly fell from the sky, and a dangerous aura suddenly locked it. The level 4 mutant rat's whole body stiffened. It was scared by this aura and couldn't move. In its heart, it desperately shouted to run, but its limbs were stiff and couldn't move. When it looked up, it saw a huge snake head open its mouth, showing 2 poisonous fangs and biting it fiercely. So the level 4 mutant rat flew into the sky. Well, its soul flew into the sky. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The sudden appearance of the giant snake immediately scared the surrounding rats, and they instantly jumped up and ran around for their lives. Dahe bit the still struggling rat, and impolitely injected the venom in its fangs into it. After a while, the giant rat softly drooped down and stopped moving. Dahe happily dragged the rat away, climbed up a tree, and found a comfortable position to slowly enjoy it. Chapter 878. On the other side, the mushroom spirit also stretched out its mutated tentacles and happily sucked the blood of a level 3 mutated rat. After Lin Xiao finished eating the whole mutated rat, she left behind a pile of internal organs and fur. She turned around and jumped up a tall tree. After she emerged from the canopy, she looked in the direction of the swarm of rats. Squinting her eyes slightly, she could see that there were some rats with relatively high energy levels among the group of rats. It seemed like they were of a higher level. The other side of the originally dense forest had been gnawed clean and was full of sawdust. The ground was full of countless black-haired rats. Lin Xiao saw that half of the forest was filled with tall green trees, while the other half was a desolate flat land. Countless black rats were surging on the flat land. Coming down from the tree, Lin Xiao began to walk around the edge of the swarm of rats. Since she was already here, she decided to check out the situation of these rats. After Awang, Dahe, and the mushroom spirit had a full meal, they followed Lin Xiao and walked around the swarm of rats. Of course, these rats were so large that they were not only destructive, they had also attracted many of their natural enemies. Birds, snakes, cats, and dogs were all good at catching rats. Therefore, Lin Xiao saw some hunting scenes from time to time. There were many mutated cats and mutated dogs. There were also many mutated eagles and other raptors flying in the sky. From time to time, they would land with a big rat in their claws and fly up again. Not far ahead of Lin Xiao, a group of people was being chased by a swarm of rats. Bang, bang, bang. More than a dozen SUVs were protecting the trucks in the middle. They were holding all kinds of guns and shooting at the large group of black-haired rats that were chasing after them. There were paranormals and ordinary people among these people. The people in the modified trucks were all ordinary people. There were paranormals and ordinary people in the dozens of SUVs. However, they were all ordinary people with relatively high combat power. They had to kill zombies in front and mice at the back. If they were not careful, they would be scratched or bitten by zombies. Lin Xiao smelled them from afar. From the direction they were coming from, she could roughly guess that they were from Hidden Cloud City or Ground Dragon Base. I told you not to go this way. You didn't believe me. Look, not only are these rats chasing after us, they will also attract other mutated beasts. In one of the off-road vehicles, a man gloomily stared at the others and said. The others didn't have time to care about him. They were all attacking the rats from both sides of the window or the roof of the car. The rats at the back were all as big as cats, and there were even bigger rats. Moreover, their movements were very agile and fast. His jumping ability was also very strong, and he could jump a few meters with a single leap. Suddenly, a giant rat the size of a domesticated pig, weighing at least 300 catties, rushed out from the side of the convoy. With a single leap, he accurately pounced onto the outermost car. Bang! Squeak. The greater rat's black fur shone as it swung its thick tail and landed on the roof of the car. Half of the car was crushed by the impact. Ah! A person who was standing on the roof of the car and trying to attack was bitten on the head by the giant rat and dragged out of the car. Bang, bang. The car was crushed until half of it collapsed. The steering wheel in the driver's hand slipped and slammed into a cement pillar on the side. The whole car flipped over. Squeak! The giant rat nimbly jumped off the car when the car flipped over. Cough, cough, cough. The people in the car were not dead yet, but they had lost the ability to move. At this moment, the giant rat raised its claws and waved. Poof! The car door was slashed open. Then, the giant rat opened its mouth and bit, pulling the steel door outward. Immediately, a hole was opened. However, for the few people in the car who were not dead yet, they died even faster. Ah! The giant rat stuck its sharp mouth and nose in and immediately bit one of the people and dragged him out. The person was dragged out with blood all over his body. His internal organs and bones were severely damaged. He could only let out a shrill scream. At this time, the other rats immediately surrounded them and went in through the window or the hole. They directly opened their mouth and bit. When this car flipped, The people in the other cars did not turn around to help. Now they basically only cared about themselves. As long as they were alive, it was fine. In addition to the ordinary people in the car, there were also some armed men standing on the roof of the car, shooting at the rats and zombies that approached the car. Motherfucker, go to hell! At this time, a man in an off-road vehicle shouted and threw a grenade in his hand towards the giant rat that was as big as a pig. Boom! Squeak. The giant rat could not dodge in time and was blown to the side. However, as soon as it fell, it immediately rolled from the ground and fiercely rushed towards the car that threw the grenade. The grenade is useless against it. It's coming. As soon as the man saw the giant rat that was still able to get up after being blown away, he saw that it was heading towards them. After seeing it coming towards them, he panicked and screamed. At this time, the zombies in front of them suddenly disappeared. The group of rats behind them suddenly stopped, stood up and sniffed something with their noses. Bang, bang, bang. These people were still shooting because the rats suddenly stopped. Many of them were shot dead by them. Squeak. At this time, the biggest rat suddenly screamed, turned around and ran away. After the other rats heard it, they immediately turned around and ran back. They retreated. What happened? They didn't chase? The expressions of the people in the car became blank. After a while, they all became surprised. They all let out a big sigh of relief. That's great. They didn't chase. Motherfucker, I thought I was going to die. Fuck. These mutated rats grew so big, it's too scary. Less than 300 meters away from their car, Lin Xiao stood there expressionlessly on a tree. Although she had retracted her aura, there was no way to conceal her scent. So when she got closer, these rats all smelled her scent and were scared away. And the surrounding zombies, even if they did not smell her scent, they could still feel the pressure of her kind. Of course, these were all things that humans could not feel. Lin Xiao did not intend to meet these people, so she turned around and left in the other direction. But after she left, she did not notice that in this car, there was a person who was blankly looking in her direction. It seemed that he felt something, but he was not very sure. However, he looked at the group of rats that suddenly retreated, and then looked at the place where Lin Xiao was just hiding. He could not help but say, I think there may be something more dangerous nearby. What did you find? As soon as he spoke, the others immediately looked at him nervously. I don't feel anything now. The man shook his head, but his expression did not relax. Chapter 879. Sun Lunan looked in that direction thoughtfully, and hesitantly guessed in his heart. What's wrong? The people next to him saw him like this and asked him. Looking outside, not only were the rats gone, but the zombies were also gone. For a moment, it suddenly quieted down, which made everyone feel somewhat at a loss and uncomfortable. Sun Lunan suddenly pointed in the direction where Lin Xiao had gone and said, Let's go that way. The people next to him looked at him in confusion. Why? Sun Lunan's eyes flashed. I just felt something over there. Because of this thing, the mutated rats and zombies that were chasing us suddenly retreated. But that thing gave me a feeling that there was no danger. So I think we will be safer if we follow its direction. Hearing this, the eyes of the others immediately lit up. Really? Are you sure? What is that thing? Can you feel it? Sun Lunan stuck his head out of the car and sniffed, then pulled back and shook his head. I don't know what it is. Let's not get too close. Just go in this direction. His ability was of the zoology family, and he was a canine. A dog's nose and intuition were very strong, and they were very sensitive to danger. So they treated him as a guide. At least when he pointed in a special direction, their intuition would be safer. Sun Lunan's car was in the first place, so wherever they went, the cars behind followed. Lin Xiao walked with the three of them, and suddenly felt that the cars kept a fixed distance from her. She was a little surprised. Could these people feel her presence? Hiss. It seemed to feel that it was being followed, and Dahe was obviously a little unhappy. But with a bulging stomach, it was too lazy to move. It just stuck out its tongue from time to time, and its eyes looked very impatient. Don't move. Hide and see what they are doing. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed, and she said to the three of them, Dahe liked to hide, so it disappeared as soon as Lin Xiao finished speaking. The mushroom spirit directly dug its legs into the ground, and after a few burrows, it stayed in the same place. It was like a big mushroom that had originally grown here. The place where she was at was originally a forest park, and now the mutated trees had grown taller than before, but many of them had withered. The road in the park was not easy to walk on. The motorcade turned along the edge of the park. Even if they slowly pulled away from Lin Xiao, they still maintained the same direction. After Lin Xiao stopped, Sun Lunan suddenly said, "Wait a minute. That thing seems to have stopped. We can't keep following it like this. Besides, we still have to go to the new base. This thing can't go. Should we go and see what it is? If possible, how about luring it to the upper city base with us? With its existence, we don't need to be afraid of those zombies and rats," someone said after thinking for a while. Sun Lunan glanced at him, somewhat tempted, but first he had to figure out what it was. What if it was something dangerous? But if it wasn't something dangerous, it wouldn't scare away the zombies and mutant rats. Moreover, they had been following the other party for so long, but the other party did not seem to have noticed anything unusual. "I'll bring 2 people with me to check out what it is. Maybe it's a very powerful mutated beast," Sun Lunan said after thinking for a while. Since the other party could move it, it was most likely a mutated beast. However, it could also be a mutated plant. It wasn't like there weren't any plants that could run. "Just a few of you? That's too dangerous. We're in the forest." The others heard and said disapprovingly, "It's okay, I don't feel any danger. If there's any danger, we'll immediately give up and come back." Sun Lunan said firmly. Their current position was tens of kilometers away from the upper city. If they could get their hands on this thing, they would be in danger on the road ahead. Tens of kilometers was not long, but it wasn't short either. However, danger was always present. Along the way, 2/3 of their team had already died. The remaining people were the ones who had sacrificed their lives in exchange for their survival. He had to think of a way to bring these people to the safe base in the upper city. So now he wanted to take the risk to see what that thing was. Maybe this thing was only a threat to the mutated beasts and zombies, but not to humans? Although it was dangerous, it could also be an opportunity for them. After all, these 2 things sometimes existed at the same time. Moreover, Sun Lunan's intuition was very accurate. Although it wasn't very strong, it was very good at escaping. "Then bring Chi-Chi along, she should be of some use," someone said. Sun Lunan thought about it. Chi-Chi was an ice ability user. Although she hadn't broken through to level 5, she was almost there. She still had some attack power. They stopped the car and prepared their weapons. "Chi-Chi, follow Lunan in to take a look," Peng Xian shouted at the other car. However, no one came down from the car he was looking at. Peng Xian could only look at Sun Lunan helplessly. Sun Lunan smiled and shouted at the car, "Chi-Chi, come here." Then a young girl came down from the car. She was wearing a light-colored trench coat with a white t-shirt underneath. She was wearing light blue jeans with a white stripe and a pair of black boots that reached her calves. The girl's delicate face was expressionless. Her eyes were cold, and her long black hair flowed smoothly down to her hips. Chi-Chi was only 20 years old this year. She was very young. In the apocalypse, a girl like her would be in a dangerous situation if she was surrounded by a group of men. Fortunately, she was one of the top 5 in the team in terms of strength. Anyone who dared to provoke her would have to be prepared to be frozen into a popsicle. She wasn't tall, but her body was thin and her legs were long and slender. She walked in front of Sun Lunan with her slender legs, and her cold eyes showed some warmth. "Brother Lunan." She wouldn't give face to anyone here, but she would only listen to Sun Lunan. Sun Lunan nodded and glanced at her before saying to the others, "Everyone knows the dangers of entering the forest, so don't be careless." Just as they were about to enter the forest to look for something, Lin Xiao had already concealed her aura and slowly approached them. When she stopped, she saw that the other party had indeed stopped as well. It seemed that the other party was really watching her. Lin Xiao wanted to see what these people were planning to do by following her. She was also not heading back to the base. Weren't they heading back to the base? After a while, she sensed a few human auras approaching her. These people were quite brave to enter the forest that was filled with mutated plants. And they were obviously coming for her. Weren't they afraid of angering her? Chapter 880. When she was a few hundred meters away from the other party, Lin Xiao stopped and stood on a tree, waiting quietly. How did these people discover her? And how could they keep following her? Soon, she found out that the group of people could accurately avoid the positions of the highly aggressive mutated plants. They turned left and right, making their way towards her position. Although their speed was a little slow, they did not encounter any actual danger. It seemed that among these people, someone had awakened a special skill. Lin Xiao stood on a branch that was tens of meters high, her army green camouflage uniform hidden in the leaves. As long as she did not move, no one would be able to discover her. But soon, she found out that she was wrong. She saw that the group of 5 slowly walked to a position not far from where she was on the tree. One of the men in the group twitched his nose, and suddenly raised his head to look at the branch she was on. So when the two of them looked at each other, Lin Xiao stared expressionlessly at the other party's eyes, her mind sweeping away all the thoughts she had just had. Who said that no one could discover her? Where did this person come from? Her breath had been suppressed to the extreme, but her position was still accurately discovered by the other party. At this time, Sun Lunan was also very surprised, because he had thought that it could be a mutated animal, or a mutated plant, or even a high-level zombie. But unexpectedly he saw a person. A woman. Since she had been discovered, there was no point in hiding anymore. Lin Xiao directly flipped down from the top of the branch, and then nimbly landed on a branch that was only a few meters higher than Sun Lunan and the others. Who are you? After Lin Xiao came down, he looked down at them with an expressionless face and asked calmly. She did not ask why these people were following her, because then she might not be able to find out their intentions. Mo Chichi took a step forward and guarded in front of Sun Lunan. She slightly raised her head and stared closely at Lin Xiao. And when Lin Xiao saw the 2 dog ears on Sun Lunan's head suddenly standing up, she could more or less guess what was going on. Alright, there was a humanoid dog with a very good nose here. Did they find her by following her scent? Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao and sniffed around to make sure that there was no one else around. Only then did he confirm that this woman had appeared here alone. Since he dared to barge into the forest alone, it was obvious that he was not a simple person. Sun Lunan did not say a word and just stared at Lin Xiao, sizing him up. Who are you? Another man behind him stared at Lin Xiao and couldn't help but ask. After seeing Lin Xiao's face, apart from Sun Lunan and Mo Chichi, the eyes of the other 3 flashed with amazement and fascination. What a beauty! Lin Xiao glanced at the man without saying a word. The other party's blatant gaze didn't cause her expression to change in the slightest. Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao. He could not sense the level of the other party's aura. He could only smell it. The woman's scent was very strange. There was a light and strange fragrance. It was not like the smell of the plants in this forest, nor was it like the sweet fragrance of flowers. He could not see the woman's strength and ability level. However, his intuition told him that it would be very dangerous if he made this woman his enemy. I'm sorry, we were just passing by. If we disturbed you, I apologize. Let's leave now. Following the intuition in his heart, Sun Lunan immediately responded. When the other 3 heard him, they immediately looked at Sun Lunan with a strange expression. They opened their mouths, but were stopped by Sun Lunan's glare. Lin Xiao looked at them expressionlessly. It seemed that the other party did not intend to tell them why they were following her. Seeing that she was not speaking, Sun Lunan immediately gestured for the others to retreat. He then took a few steps back, and when he saw that Lin Xiao still did not move, he immediately turned and ran out. The other 3 stared at Lin Xiao's face regretfully for a while before turning and leaving. After leaving a distance, he then asked Sun Lunan, "Why are you retreating? Is that woman dangerous?" Sun Lunan nodded and said, "I couldn't sense the level of the other party's superpower. And although the other party wasn't hostile, although she is not hostile, she doesn't seem to want us to go near her." The others were not stupid. When they heard Sun Lunan say that he could not sense the level of her ability, it could only mean that she had either not awakened her ability, or that her ability level was too high, and she was hiding it. Since she dared to appear alone in this dangerous forest, she must not be a simple person. She's so beautiful. She's also very clean. Another person licked his lips. A look of infatuation and greed flashed in his eyes. Sun Lunan looked at him and said coldly, I think you better not think of provoking her. My intuition tells me that she's not a good person. Then we'll go back like this. What about the thing you were looking for? Are we not looking for it anymore? Another person looked at Sun Lunan hesitantly and asked, We've found it, but we can't take it away. Sun Lunan said calmly as he looked around for mutated plants and poisonous insects. When he saw Lin Xiao, he already knew that she was the thing he was looking for. But they might not have the ability to take her away, and she would not go with them. Can't take it away? Then what should we do? There are still tens of kilometers before we reach the upper city. If we go on like this, I'm afraid there won't be many people who can make it to the safe base. Another person said unwillingly. There's no other way. The other party's intention was very clear. Just now, she didn't want to go with us. So she definitely won't go with us, Sun Lunan said. That was why he made a prompt decision to leave with them immediately. Sun Lunan and the people around him did not know that although their voices were very far away from Lin Xiao, she could still hear their conversation clearly. Lin Xiao thought about the shock and surprise in the eyes of the dog-eared man just now. It seemed that he did not expect to meet her. Or rather, he did not expect to meet a human. From their current conversation, she deduced that the other party might have found something beneficial on her, which was why he kept following her. He might even want to get her, so that they could reach the base safely. It seemed that the other party had gotten the answer they wanted just now, but this answer made them feel afraid, which was why they left quickly. If not for that, based on the emotions in the eyes of the few men just now, they would probably do something bad to her. Seeing that the other party was leaving quickly, a giant black snake slowly slid down from the top of the tree. The giant snake bent its body and hung on the branch next to Lin Xiao. Its pair of cold and emotionless eyes silently looked in the direction where Sun Lunan and the others had left. Chapter 881. After Sun Lunan and the others left, Lin Xiao took Da He, A Wang, and the other two to the edge of the rat colony. After waiting for a while, she suddenly felt a familiar zombie's aura approaching. Lin Xiao stopped on a tree and waited on a huge branch. Not long after, she saw a level 4 wind zombie land not far away from her. Leader. This level 4 wind zombie was one of the zombies that Lin Xiao had sent to Xiadong. She looked at it and nodded. Have you been watching over here? Yes. The wind zombie nodded, but he looked like he had been wronged. He was afraid of rats. He was the one who had found the rat colony, but he was sent by his leader to watch over here. Looking at these black-furred mice, the wind zombie's whole body felt uncomfortable. Lin Xiao seemed to know what the wind zombie was thinking. She looked at him strangely. You are a zombie. Why are you afraid of rats? This rat could eat zombies. The wind zombie responded weakly. Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly. Was the weakness of this zombie that he was afraid of rats? He had been sent by Xiadong to watch over here for a month. Why was he afraid? Let's talk about the situation of this rat colony. It's good that you're here. Since you are here, I don't have to run anymore. Lin Xiao sat on the branch and touched her stomach. She asked about the size of the swarm and how long it would take to walk around the swarm. She didn't ask about the number, since there were so many of them that she couldn't count. Are there any powerful guys? Lin Xiao continued to ask after she had a general understanding of the rat colony. The wind zombie shook his head. Maybe there are, but you don't know. Lin Xiao looked at him silently and didn't say anything. After all, the wind zombie was only level 4, so he could only sense level 5 or 6 mutated beasts. He couldn't sense anything stronger. Lin Xiao took out a level 5 energy core from the space and sat on the tree to absorb the energy. Although she couldn't use her ability, she could still absorb energy. However, she could feel that the energy she absorbed would be directly absorbed by Little Man. Because her head was already empty, Little Man couldn't absorb her energy. Fortunately, She didn't feel anything strange in her stomach. It was just that he was worried at first, afraid that if little man didn't have any energy to absorb, it might affect her development. So he took out the energy core to absorb. In the end, she found that the energy she absorbed was all snatched away by little man. Lin Xiao did not care about this. Instead, he felt more at ease. After staying here for a few days to check on the situation of these rats, he found that these rats had stopped expanding. It didn't really stop, but it didn't bite anything it saw. It was a complete destruction. During this period, Dahe, Awang, and the mushroom spirit had a great time. They could not stop eating meat. Fortunately, Dahe and Awang knew to bring the energy core back for Lin Xiao. As for the mushroom, it was the prey that they had caught, so they took it all for themselves. They had no intention of sharing it with Lin Xiao. The level 6 Dahe was invincible in this group of snakes. It chased the mutant rats from level 3 to level 6 all day long. It didn't care about the low-level ones, so it disturbed the whole group of rats. The rats, who usually bit anything they saw, only knew to run away in fear under the breath of their natural enemy. It was impossible for them to pounce on Dahe and bite it, not to mention that Dahe was a level 6 mutant beast. Its breath could directly scare the mutant rats that had not yet leveled up to death. Lin Xiao took the energy core of the mutant rats that Awang and Dahe had sent over the past 2 days and directly absorbed it into his body. Then little man absorbed it. It was a pity that humans couldn't eat the meat of the mutant rats for the time being. Otherwise, Lin Xiao would have wanted to catch a bunch of them to add to the meals of the people in the base. However, if the meat of the mutant rats was edible, Lin Xiao wouldn't have needed to catch them. Everyone would naturally pounce on them and catch them themselves. At that time, the unlucky situation would be reversed. When they came out of the forest park, Lin Xiao rode on Awang's back because he couldn't drive. The zombie dog's black hair was still very short, but it was fluffy and soft. It wasn't small in size and was originally as tall as Lin Xiao's waist. Now that it had leveled up, it was almost at the position of Lin Xiao's chest. After the bald tail was removed, the length of its body was more than 1.9 meters, almost 2 meters. Therefore, carrying Lin Xiao, who only weighed more than 90 kilograms, was naturally very easy. When they encountered zombies, they would stay far away from them. When they encountered mutant beasts, other than those that were level 6 and above, they would also stay far away from them. When Lin Xiao returned to the periphery of the base without any obstructions, she met the group of people again. When she sensed that there were people, she had already released the 3 pets into the surrounding forest. Lin Xiao didn't dare to bring them into the space, because that meant that she would have to go in as well. She couldn't bring the other people in the space out for the time being. Unless she wasn't in a hurry to stay where she was, she wouldn't be afraid of running dozens of kilometers away in an instant. Standing on the roof, she could see the high walls of the base from afar. However, the zombies outside the base were all gone. Instead, there was a dense group of zombies surrounding the Wuxian cultivation base. It's her. When Sun Lunan and the others saw Lin Xiao on the roof, they were surprised. This woman should also be a member of this new base. Anyway, the place where we met her before was the closest to this base. Another man said after seeing Lin Xiao. Should be. Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao, then retracted his gaze. At this time, everyone in the car was wounded, and their clothes were stained with blood and sand. Their bodies were tired and in pain, and they just wanted to quickly enter the base, find a place to rest and have a meal. More importantly, there were still injured people in the team who needed treatment. In fact, Sun Lunan and the others were not in a relaxed mood, even though they had entered the safety zone around the base. The periphery of every base would be cleared of zombies. Other than the 200-meter empty isolation zone, the base's army would come out to clear the zombies outside the isolation zone every day, slowly expanding the safety zone around the base. Of course, because of Lin Xiao's uniqueness, the base's safety zone didn't need to be cleared by the army. Sun Lunan and the others had entered the zombie-free zone not long ago, but they didn't think that the new base's isolation zone could be expanded that far. Therefore, they didn't let their guard down. Lin Xiao stood on the roof and looked at their convoy. She noticed that a few heavy trucks were still in good condition, but the number of off-road vehicles around them seemed to have decreased. She didn't take it to heart, turned around and jumped down from the building. Chapter 882. Lin Xiao landed on the ground and took out a car. He sat in the driver's seat and drove towards the south gate of the base. In fact, he was just following behind Sun Lunan and the rest. After a few minutes of driving, they arrived at the isolated area outside the base. The car slowly drove past the isolated area and stopped at the south gate. There was a check before entering the base, but there was no such equipment at the gate of the base. "Stay here and don't move," the soldiers at the south gate of the base said loudly to Sun Lunan and the rest. Then Sun Lunan and the rest looked at a team of soldiers in camouflage coming out of the gate with a blank face. They were all wearing hats and sunglasses, so that they couldn't see their faces clearly. The group of people split up and walked around each of their vehicles. Then they returned to the gate and nodded at the soldiers at the gate. Then they made a gesture to let them pass and left. "Okay, you can come in. Follow me." The captain of the soldiers at the gate nodded and turned to greet Sun Lunan and the rest. Sun Lunan and the others looked at each other in a daze for a moment. How could they pass just like that? Didn't they need a check? "Don't you need a check?" Sun Lunan couldn't help getting out of the car and walked to the captain of the soldiers and asked. At the same time, he thought of another problem. If the base didn't have a check, how would they know if anyone had brought in the virus? Wasn't it very unsafe? "Yes, those people wearing sunglasses were checking for you." The captain smiled, showing his 8 teeth. Every time the new survivors came, they would ask this question. Sun Lunan's expression became more blank. Those people didn't do anything. They just walked around their cars and they knew? Seeming to have guessed Sun Lunan's thoughts, the captain smiled and said, "Yes, if any of you were infected, they would know. Hurry up. Many of your people are seriously injured. Don't worry, our base is very safe." As he spoke, the captain urged with good intentions. But the more he urged, the more Sun Lunan didn't dare to believe him. But the more he urged, the more Sun Lunan didn't dare to believe him. So the people in the heavy truck didn't get out of the car, and just sat in the car, and entered the base gate. Therefore, before the people on the heavy trucks got off, they inexplicably entered the base again. Only then did Lin Xiao appear at the very back. Lin Xiao did not get out of the car. Instead, he drove the car into the main gate with an expressionless face. Just now, when the zombie soldiers wearing glasses and hats came over to check, of course, they discovered her existence. Of course, they recognized Lin Xiao's aura. Without Lin Xiao's orders, they just needed to do their own tasks. After Lin Xiao drove the car in, he felt the aura coming from the entire base, many of which were unfamiliar. It seemed that several groups of people had entered the base while she was away. After Lin Xiao entered the base, the other people in the base all stopped what they were doing and looked at the south gate of the base blankly. Yuan Tianxing looked at Chen Yuding hesitantly and asked, "Do you sense the leader's aura?" Chen Yuding nodded and looked at him strangely. "I felt it. But why did she come back from outside? Didn't she stay in the base the entire time? When did he go out?" "You don't know? I thought you would at least know." Yuan Tianxing was the deputy leader. Even if their leader secretly left the base to deal with something, he would at least tell Yuan Tianxing. Now, looking at Yuan Tianxing's confused expression, it seemed that he didn't know. Elmar, Qiu Lily, Lin Kuei, and the others directly appeared in Lin Xiao's office. When Lin Xiao entered the office, she found that her office was already full of people. "You guys are really fast. Hey Lin Kuei, you're back. Did you find your sister?" Lin Xiao calmly greeted everyone after coming in. Lin Kuei didn't say anything and just nodded. Before bringing Lin Jing here, Lin Kuei actually didn't feel much about this base. But after bringing Lin Jing back, he felt that his responsibility was a little heavy. At least he had a little sense of belonging. His sister was now living in this base. He couldn't protect her openly in the past, but now he could. He could protect Lin Jing openly, and didn't need to hide anymore. He also didn't need to worry about being taken away for experiments. In order to give Lin Jing a place to stay, and make it convenient for him to take care of her. Of course, Lin Kuei was willing to protect this newly built base. Lin Xiao nodded to him. It's good that you found her. Congratulations. Lin Kuei smiled at Lin Xiao this time. The smile made his face look less gloomy. Why did you come back from outside? When did you go out? Why didn't we feel anything? Elmar looked at Lin Xiao strangely. She couldn't see anything wrong with Lin Xiao's body. Nor could she feel that Lin Xiao couldn't use her ability, whether it was in her eyes, or in the eyes of Chiu Lily Lin Kuei, and the other zombies. Her aura was still at the peak of level 7. Lin Xiao walked to his desk that was piled up like a mountain and sat down. He picked up a document and opened it. Oh, something happened, so I went out. Tell me, did anything happen in the base while I was away? Is your body okay? You didn't look well before. Chiu Lily suddenly thought of something and asked her worriedly. It's okay for now. Lin Xiao comforted her with a smile. Although she didn't know what little man was doing in her body, it seemed that she had calmed down a little after observing her for the past few days. Except when she needed energy, she would send a hint to Lin Xiao to make her feel that she didn't have enough energy. Elmar also looked at Lin Xiao. Her expression didn't change, and her aura didn't seem to be abnormal. Then she started to talk about the situation in the base. Everything else is fine. It's just that the population of the base has increased a lot. With more people, there are more thoughts. Some people are interested in our base and think it's good, so they want to replace it. Elmar sneered. She reported the intention of Zhuochen's group and their current progress. Then she continued, if it wasn't for the fact that I want to slap them in the face, I really want to throw them out. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed and he smiled. We can't just throw them out. There's no reason to kick them out. It's not good for our base's reputation, and it will affect other survivors joining us in the future. We need evidence to kick them out perfectly. This was also the reason why Yuan Tianxing asked the girls to play games with those people. Chapter 883. Since these people wanted to rob her base, it would be too easy for them to just throw them out. Of course, they couldn't just kill them at this time. Since they couldn't kill them, they would just let these people seek their own deaths. After Elmar and Chiu Lily left, Duanwan, Xiedong, and Xin Yuzhen came. These people have been keeping an eye on the cultivation base. I think they are going to use the zombies as an excuse, Xin Yuzhen said. The cultivation base is more than 10 kilometers away from here, and it's not within the safety zone's range. Just ignore them. If they don't want to stay, ask them to leave. But don't let them see the situation in the cultivation base, Lin Xiao said calmly. She didn't have much to worry about when it came to those people. Anyway, these people were on the road to death. Did they think she was easy to bully? Did they want to seduce her, the leader? What kind of trick was that? Was she that easy to fall in love with someone? Lin Xiao felt disgusted just thinking about it. Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't seem to care about these people, Xin Yuzhen said, they couldn't find you, so they planned to get information about you from me, Duanwan, Miss Wenwen, and Department Head Lu Jun. The people who were sent to get information about us weren't their subordinates, but the first and second batches of people who came in from the base. From what I've seen these days, they are ready to make a move on Duanwan. They should be sneaking into your dormitory tonight, Xiedong, who had been silent all this time, suddenly reminded her. Duanwan's eyes flashed. She nodded and looked at Lin Xiao and asked, should we fight back? Lin Xiao looked at Xiedong and asked, who are these people? How strong are they? There's only one level 6 Earth-type metahuman in this group. The rest are level 5. It seems that in order to successfully capture Duanwan, the level 6 metahuman is going to do it himself. There are 2 other level 5 metahumans working with him. One spirit, and the other natural wood, Xiedong said. Lin Xiao thought about it. It wasn't the right time to let these people fail, but she couldn't let them capture Duanwan. Let's avoid this time, and not alert the enemy. What's the situation with Lu Jun and Wenwen? Lin Xiao said. Lu Jun has been hanging on to Hua Antong. Wenwen has already pretended to be in danger and contacted him, Xiedong said. Write down the list of people who participated in this matter. Only those who participated, and those who knew about it must be dealt with afterward, Lin Xiao said with his arms crossed in front of his chest. Yes. All right, that's all for now. After sending them away, Lin Xiao began to deal with the mountain of official business. There was still a lot of work for her to do, such as reading documents, signing signatures, changing plans, and so on. However, there were still people who did not intend to give her time to do this. I say, since you're back, shouldn't you come to my place for a checkup first? Lin Hao entered the office and closed the door. Then he said in a bad mood. When Lin Xiao saw him, he knew that he had to put down his work for the time being. He spread his hands and said, "Look at me. I still have so many things to do. Moreover, little man's condition is not abnormal, so I don't need to go to your place. What about you? How are you doing? Ever since you entered the space, you haven't come out for almost a month. Do you know how anxious I am?" Lin Hao glared at her, extremely dissatisfied. "I'm fine now, aren't I? You can't help me if there's something wrong." Lin Xiao looked at him helplessly. "Why did I hear that you came back from outside? Would it kill you to come out of the space and tell me? What kind of expression is that? You think I can't help you? If you don't even let me check your condition, how can I research a treatment method for you?" Lin Hao was a little angry. His handsome face was panting with anger. Lin Xiao could only sigh. "All right, I got it. In the future, if there's anything wrong with my body, I'll definitely go to you. Is that okay? In the future? So now you still don't plan to go to my place and use the equipment?" Lin Hao raised his eyebrows. He had always wanted to know the condition of her body, so that he could think of a solution for her. However, the other party obviously did not care about it. Who was he doing this for? "All right, I got it. I'll go with you now, okay?" Seeing Lin Hao's expression, Lin Xiao could only put down the work in her hands and go to the hospital with him. After being tormented by Lin Hao using all kinds of equipment for more than an hour, Lin Xiao looked at the sky outside. It was already dark. "How is it? Can you see anything?" The equipment showed that her physical signs were all static. Apart from the color and state of her body, there was almost no living data. However, after seeing the situation in her uterus, he could not help but be amazed. "Look, she has grown a lot. It's so strange, there's no heartbeat. But it can really grow." Looking at the screen of the equipment, a small baby holding a small fist appeared on the screen, curled up into a ball. Lin Xiao stood behind him, her eyes fixed on the little child. Her eyes were shining brightly. After checking that there was nothing wrong with the child, Lin Xiao left Lin Hao's consulting room. After returning to her place, she felt that there was someone in the room before opening the door. Lin Xiao's hand that was unlocking the door paused. Then she opened the door and pushed it in. "What's the matter?" Turning on the light, she looked at the man sitting on the sofa expressionlessly. Wu Qingyue had a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. His eyes just quietly looked at Lin Xiao without saying a word. Lin Xiao glanced at him, walked to the sofa next to him and sat down. After thinking for a moment, she said, "It wasn't because of you last time. Don't worry about it." She was referring to the last time she suddenly had a fit here. At that time, the man's face was obviously a little scared. She faintly felt that his feelings seemed to be a lot purer for a moment. "I just want to see how the little baby looks." Wu Qingyue smiled faintly and glanced at Lin Xiao's belly. Lin Xiao's belly was a little big now, and she could no longer wear military pants. Therefore, she had already changed before coming back. Lin Xiao, who didn't wear a skirt before, was now wearing a black dress and a pair of black pantyhose. Over the dress, she wore a long, loose brown coat. Lowering her head to touch her belly, Lin Xiao said calmly, "She's fine." For some reason, she suddenly felt that it was normal for Wu Qingyue to care about the child. "What about you?" Wu Qingyue then asked her. He was used to seeing her in her military uniform. Suddenly seeing her in casual clothes like this, he felt a little guilty. Wu Qingyue felt that she had become a lot softer. Today the man's style was normal. Lin Xiao looked up at him and said, "I'm also fine. By the way, I originally wanted to ask you to borrow the seeds, but I didn't expect you to ask first. Thank you." Chapter 884. Knowing that she was changing the topic, Wu Qingyue's expression didn't change. "You're welcome. After all, we also need to repay." Lin Xiao nodded. The contract he signed with Yuan Tianxing stated, that he would give 35% of the annual harvest to Haiqing Base. The two of them suddenly looked at each other in silence for a while. Lin Xiao saw that he seemed to have something to say. She just waited quietly. After waiting for a while, Wu Qingyue finally hesitantly opened his mouth and asked, "Is there a problem with your space?" There was a trace of worry in his eyes as he looked at her. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed and asked, "Why do you ask?" Was it because she came back from outside? But everyone thought that she had sneaked out secretly. Wu Qingyue looked at her and said, "Where you entered the space before, when you came out, you would still be in the same place. But this time, you ran out of the base." He didn't say the rest of the sentence, but Lin Xiao could guess what he meant. Wu Qingyue paused and continued, "I waited here every day. But you didn't appear. Even if you wanted to hide, there was no need." Wu Qingyue also didn't think that this female zombie would hide herself as soon as she came out of the space, because she never hid from him, right? Even when he pestered her every day, she only had an indifferent attitude and didn't think about hiding from him. So when this female zombie suddenly came in from outside without warning, Wu Qingyue faintly felt that something was wrong. If it wasn't a problem with her space, then maybe there was a problem with her body. But Lin Xiao didn't want him to know about her situation. Her strength had decreased. She wouldn't be stupid enough to expose this. "If you want to know about my situation, I'm fine now." Lin Xiao looked at him and said. She couldn't understand this man right now, and she couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't do anything after knowing about her situation. She still had to keep a distance from him. Wu Qingyue could feel that she was still keeping a distance from him, but he found that this female zombie might not have noticed it, but she didn't seem to reject him that much. "I want to protect you." Wu Qingyue only said these 5 words, then stood up and turned to leave. "I want to protect you, I won't hurt you. So I want to know about your situation, so that I can protect you, right?" He knew that if he said this, it would make the female zombie feel that he was looking down on her. She was a strong-willed woman, so he could only say those 5 words. Although the female zombie's rejection of him had weakened a lot, the trust between the two was still maintained on the basis of cooperation. He really wanted her to take a step back and tell him about her situation, but he knew that she would definitely not say it out loud. Then he could only keep an eye on her. Lin Xiao stared blankly at his tall silhouette, as a trace of confusion flashed across his eyes. Then he regained his clarity, but his gaze was much calmer. The next day, Lin Xiao began to work as a leader. While going to the cultivation base to investigate the situation, he also approved the official documents. The weather in May and June had already warmed up, and now the survivors in the base were automatically organizing to leave the base to gather supplies. The materials collected could be kept for themselves, and the rest could be handed over to the base to be exchanged for points. In addition, if he didn't need it, and didn't want to hand it over to the base, he could also exchange it with others. There were very few people in the base, and there were also very few technicians. The base recruited a large number of technicians, and began to research and manufacture some daily necessities, weapons, communication tools, and so on. As for the other bases, they could only nervously study the land and planting, thinking of all kinds of ways to grow normal crops. However, the problems they encountered ranged from not being able to survive, to not being able to grow up, or not bearing fruit when they grew up, or being infected and mutated. Apart from the universal base, the other bases were all suppressed by a sense of despair. Only the upper echelons of Haiqing knew that the universal life base's land could be used to grow crops. However, in order to protect the secret of the all-life base, as well as to pacify the emotions of the people, Ocean City decided to do so. He made up a lie to deceive everyone. This lie was actually a half-truth. It told everyone that Sea City had already researched soil that could grow ordinary crops, and that Sea City's food supply would not be cut off in the future. Because of this, the attitude of the people in the universal life base towards the people of Sea City was much better. Therefore, it did not take long for the other bases to receive news that Sea City could grow normal plants. China base, I've asked around. Sea City doesn't plan to release this technology. Ho Guozhong handed the information to Xikong Chun with a gloomy expression. Not releasing it? Could it be that Sea City wants to watch us starve to death? Seekong Li's face was gloomy, his brows furrowed. A trace of hostility flashed in his eyes. There had been no progress in the past few months of research. China had wasted a lot of seeds to experiment, but they had not been able to grow crops. The problem of the land had not been solved. This made Seekong Chun and the rest of the upper echelons of China base gloomy. Their words also seemed to be spoken without thinking. In this post-apocalyptic world, the bottom line of morality had long been abandoned. No one wanted to be a saint, and those who had such thoughts would soon be crushed by greed. In order to survive, no one would thank you. They would only feel that what you did was right. The greater the strength, the greater the responsibility. This was the view of humans. He took a deep breath and thought about the lives of more than 1 million people in his base. Seekong Li closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he regained his composure. Send people to contact Skyfire, Meng Clan, Black Dragon and Qingshan base. Since Sea City isn't willing to release the technology, then we can only exchange food with them. Seekong Li said with a stern expression. They contacted these bases because they were in the same situation as China. They were unable to change the soil into organic and healthy soil. In order to obtain food, they had to work with these bases. In order to obtain food, they could only cooperate with Sea City. But the main purpose was to use the strength of the major bases to force Sea City to hand over the technology. I'll make the arrangements now. Ho Guozhong nodded. What they did not know was that Sea City did not have this technology. They only said it to deceive the people in their base to make them feel at ease. Just as China was preparing to cooperate with the other bases to forcefully obtain Sea City's soil purification technology, Zhuochun and the rest of the Universal Base knew that their leader had returned and immediately began the next step. When Zhuochun saw Lin Xiao's fair face from afar, his gaze immediately became greedy and determined to get his hands on her. Chapter 885. However, Lin Xiao's status was too high. It was difficult for Zhuochun to get close to her. The first thing he needed to do was to find a position and quickly climb to the leader's side. That night, Lu Wan brought 2 rank 5 metahumans and other subordinates to ambush Duan Wan in her room, but she did not return. She did not return on the first night, nor the second night, until the 3rd day. What? She left the base for a mission? Why didn't you say so earlier? Lu Wan was furious when he received the news. They hid in the woman's room for 3 days, but she was already sent out of the base. We only received the news today. We don't know why we didn't notice her leaving. The subordinate was also at a loss. The others in the room comforted him. It's okay. Although we haven't taken her down yet. Lu Jun and Lin Wenwen are progressing well. Lu Wan's expression softened and asked, Did you get any information? The female leader has been at the medical center for the past few days, but I heard that there's nothing wrong with her body. I saw her go there. It seems like she's not sick, but to see someone. Everyone understood what he meant. It was obvious that the female leader had a very close relationship with Dr. Lin. It seems like it's true. No wonder she kept her distance from Wu Qingyue. The other said, If that's the case, why don't we let Zhuochun be hospitalized after collecting resources? At least he'll have a chance to get close to her. That's right. Since she likes to go to the medical department so much, let Zhuochun start there. The people in the room excitedly discussed their plans, thinking that these plans would be flawless for the people in the base. However, they did not notice that there was a transparent person standing by the wall in the room. Elmar saw that the people had dispersed, then snuck out of the room. After leaving, she revealed herself and went directly to Lin Xiao's office. The chameleon's ability was very useful for gathering information. On Xiedong's side, he also received some information from the Wuxia base. TSK, humans will always do such things in order to survive. In any case, the strong are respected in the post-apocalyptic world. Whoever is stronger will have better resources. She heard that the Wuxia base was going to cooperate with Haiqing to make a deal, and secretly wanted to purify the land. Lin Xiao said indifferently. She had expected such a day to come. After all, in order to survive, humans would always try their best. If those people could peacefully trade with Sea City, they might be able to live in peace. If they dared to act recklessly, then the universal base would not put Ocean City in a disadvantageous position. After all, their two bases were now in the same boat. If something happened to Sea City, the universal base would soon be exposed. The technology of the Wuxia base was very mature, and most of the materials could be produced directly. Although Haiqing's scientific research had also made progress, the results were not as good as those in China. When will they arrive at Sea City? Lin Xiao asked. The leader of Wuxia is currently discussing with the leaders of the other bases. The results are not out yet, Xiadong said. Lin Xiao nodded. Got it. Keep an eye on them. Xiadong nodded and left. Elmar knocked on the door again and entered. What do you think? How are they going to get close to me? Lin Xiao looked at her and casually asked while flipping through the documents. They said that you and Dr. Lin are too close. Seeing that you often go to the medical department, Swordsmanship is going to get injured before entering the hospital. Then, he will find an opportunity to appear in front of you. They are always using the same methods, nothing new. Elmar sat on the chair in front of her desk and said with a disdainful expression, That's because we have long seen through their intentions and plans. If we didn't see it clearly and catch them off guard, we would really fall into their trap. Isn't that right? Lin Xiao smiled faintly. Back then, Yuan Tianqing fell into their trap. Lu Tong wasn't a powerful person, but he was a little smarter. He knew that first impressions were the strongest, so Yuan Tianqing always thought of him as a weak and kind person. It could only be said that his acting skills were not bad. If it wasn't for Lin Wenwen coincidentally seeing through the problem, Yuan Tianqing would have been slept by him in the end. Elmar thought about what she said and nodded in agreement. That's true. Although Lu Jun's surname, Hua has been using the topic of the cultivation base to get close to her. He has been secretly asking about you. In their eyes, you are too secretive. Lin Xiao shrugged and said, If I don't be secretive and let them know that we are all zombies, wouldn't I be scared to death? Then they would run out and find the whole world to deal with me? Elmar suddenly said, But this surname Hua is a little strange. Since he has been bought over by Lu Wan and the others, he actually knows a lot about the cultivation base, but he hasn't revealed it to those people. Why is that? He really only revealed things about you, just like the conditions of his deal with Lu Wan and the others. He didn't say anything else. Lin Xiao looked at her and shook her head. How would I know? Maybe he has his own considerations. In everyone's eyes, Wu Qingyue seemed to be staying at the cultivation base. Although he didn't crazily pester their beautiful leader like before, he seemed to be maintaining a subtle distance from her. Their leader had a close relationship with Dr. Lin in the cultivation base, so the three of them began to have a strange atmosphere of a love triangle. Only those who knew Lin Xiao's identity were speechless. Say, why do you think our leader threw the handsome, gentle, and powerful leader Wu aside and fell in love with our Dr. Lin? Although Dr. Lin is pretty good looking, her strength is too far away from leader Wu. I just feel like she's not good enough for our leader, Hua Antong said to Lu Jun in a joking tone while sitting in the cafeteria. Lu Jun fed her son and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. She said indifferently, That's the leader's business. Why do you care so much? Although he was talking about the recent gossip in the cultivation base, how could Lu Jun not know that he was trying to pull the topic to Lin Xiao so that he could get some other information? As expected, Hua Antong said, I just feel that our leader is so young, beautiful and powerful. She wouldn't fall for someone like Dr. Lin, right? Does the leader like someone else? I feel like she's with Dr. Lin to get rid of leader Wu. Lu Jun's eyes flickered, but they were covered by her curly eyelashes. She blinked and said, You care about the leader so much. Do you like her too? Hua Antong was stunned for a moment and quickly shook his head. Oh no. The leader can only be watched from afar, not played with. Bah no. Powerful people are worthy of respect. I admire her. Chapter 886. Captain Hua, you've been very free lately. Why do you keep coming to my place? Do you also know the situation in the cultivation base? Lu Jun glanced at him again. then turned his head and continued to feed his son. Seems like I'm not welcome. Hua Antong smiled helplessly. We don't know each other well, Lu Jun reminded him. If they weren't close, some things shouldn't be asked casually. Hua Antong couldn't maintain his smile. Seeing that Lu Jun didn't care about him, and only cared about feeding his son, he took a deep breath and left with a smile. Lu Jun's lips curled into a cold smile as he watched him leave. A strange light flashed in her eyes under the contact lenses. On the other hand, Hua Antong's face was gloomy. He didn't expect the woman to be so vigilant. She would immediately interrupt him if he tried to talk about the leader. It was as if she was guarding against him. No, that was impossible. She didn't know his intentions. Why would she guard against him? It was probably just her instinctive sense of defense. On the other hand, Xie Dong suddenly entered Lin Xiao's office. Leader, I heard that the people in Sea City found something. If I'm not wrong, it's useful for crazy mutants. What is it? Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. It's a type of stone. The news came from Sea City. It was said that not long ago, they discovered a type of stone that disappeared after being eaten by a berserk mutated beast. So Sea City is sending people to look for it. Although Xie Dong was expressionless, his eyes were bright. Where is the location? Lin Xiao asked. I heard it's near Lake Tai, Xie Dong said. Lin Xiao frowned and said, if it's Lake Tai, we need to ask the people from Sea City to go with us. Because the area had been divided, Lake Tai wasn't their territory. It belonged to Sea City. In order to avoid conflict, it was better to ask. In fact, this kind of request was just a greeting for the current cooperation between the two bases. There was no problem. What made Lin Xiao frown was that the location was near Lake Tai. In that case, the danger level of this operation might be a little high, and it was also very far away. I'll go too. Just then, a voice came from outside the door. Lin Xiao and Xie Dong turned to look. He saw Leng Xiantong standing at the door, and the two of them walked in after noticing him. Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. You want to go? Leng Xiantong nodded and said, I'll be able to find it more accurately if I go. Lin Xiao looked at Xie Dong. Is the information accurate? Xie Dong nodded. Lin Xiao thought about it and nodded. All right, I'll go talk to Wu Qingyue. But Minister Leng, you are a researcher of our base. You must be careful and protect your own life first. Leng Xiantong smiled. I know. Although the stone that could suppress the madness of metahumans was important, as a scientist, Leng Xiantong was even more important. Lin Xiao knew that it was not safe for him to go. He was afraid that if he did not go, the people he sent to look for him might not be able to find him. If that happened, it would cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, with the scientists following them, the process would be very fast. Before Lin Xiao went to look for him, Wu Qingyue appeared in Lin Xiao's office in the afternoon. I heard that you're going to send people to Lake Tai. Wu Qingyue sat on the sofa and looked at Lin Xiao as soon as he entered. Lin Xiao looked up from the pile of documents and glanced at him before burying his head again. Yes, is your information accurate? I'm not sure about that. After all, the information was sent back by those corpse hunters. This is the first time they sent back information, and it's from an amateur. Only experts in this field would be able to find out. Wu Qingyue shrugged. The corpse hunters used this information to exchange for quite a lot of credits from the base. In Universal Base it was points, and in Haicheng it was called credits. Every base had a different name, but it was considered a form of contribution to the base. In Wuxia, it was called contribution. Although the name was different, the function was the same. Just like currency, it could be exchanged for anything. You could buy anything you wanted, as long as you had enough contribution. When Lin Xiao heard Wu Qingyue's words, he knew that the other party had already agreed to travel together. He nodded and said, You have more scientists on your side, send more people. I'll send a few people to buy some soy sauce. What he said was a little unfair, but Lin Xiao was not wrong. It was just that when they went there, the information found by both parties would be shared. As for who would find more valuable things, it would depend on each party's ability. Although Lin Xiao's words were a little unfair, she did not really want to take advantage of him. At the very least, she planned to make it up to him in other ways. What opinion could Wu Qingyue have? He could not wait for Lin Xiao to take advantage of him more and more. Only they themselves knew what was going on in their minds. However, Lin Xiao's next words made him feel helpless. As compensation, I can give you a batch of our base's healing potions. Wu Qingyue knew that she was referring to the potion that could slow down the awakening of metahumans. But he did not know that it was the person in the lake in her space. But for Wu Qingyue, he knew that the effects of the potion were not limited to that. Whether it was for metahumans or ordinary people, it was very useful. In this apocalyptic world where there was a lack of medicine, it could be said to be very precious. Seeing that Wu Qingyue did not say anything, Lin Xiao thought that he had agreed to this condition. In any case, they did not lose out, so she would not take advantage of others. By the way, have you thought about how to deal with China's purpose? They are secretly here, for your land purification technology. Lin Xiao suddenly thought of what Xiadong had said, and looked at Wu Qingyue. She knew that Wu Qingyue should have received the news. If Haiqing's cover was exposed, then Wuxia would definitely find out about the universal base very quickly. However, she was just asking and did not worry much. Although Xikongchen was not simple, Wu Qingyue was not a simple person either. The methods and intelligence of the two were actually about the same, but because Wu Qingyue's metahuman strength was slightly stronger, there was a faint trend of him suppressing Xikongchen. Don't worry, I will take care of it. They will not dare to use force unless they want to run out of food. Besides, they will not be able to get what they want even if they use force. Wu Qingyue smiled faintly. His gaze towards Lin Xiao deepened. Lin Xiao felt that his gaze seemed to be hinting at something, so she lowered her head to avoid his gaze and continued to sign. Yes, I am just worried about being targeted by the people from China. After all, my small base cannot afford to be tossed around. Seeing that she avoided his gaze, a trace of sadness flashed through Wu Qingyue's eyes. However, he quickly returned to normal and smiled gently without saying anything. Chapter 887. A few days later, Lin Feng and Lin Wenwen came back. However, they didn't get much and many people were injured. When Lin Feng came to report to Lin Xiao, he sat on the chair and said expressionlessly, "The mutant plants outside are growing very fast, and many of the mutant beasts are in a berserk state. Their destructive power is double that of normal. If it was in the mountains, most of the mutated beasts were from wild animals. If it was in the city, cats and dogs were more common, and there were also mice. Also, the mutated insects seem to have evolved to a higher level than before. Most of them are poisonous, and we were attacked by poisonous insects a few times." Lin Feng frowned when he talked about the mutated insects. Mutated insects? Lin Xiao's expression became serious. Lin Feng nodded. Many mutated insects can emit poisonous gas. If you're not careful, you'll be poisoned. And some of them are very big. Lin Xiao could imagine that they were big. After all the mutated beasts were big. However, the ones that emitted poisonous gas were more dangerous. Lin Feng had mentioned it, so the situation wasn't simple. Is it serious? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. Lin Feng nodded. Although there were mutated insects in the past, they didn't affect the environment. Now they have seriously affected the environment. The air around them is poisonous. If animals or humans breathe it in, there will be different degrees of effects. These effects aren't good. Affect the environment? Lin Xiao was surprised. This was serious. The environment affected by the virus was already very bad. How did these mutated insects evolve to affect the environment? There were thousands of species of insects on Earth. If this continued, the danger level of the outside world would increase again. We've encountered this phenomenon 6 times, and the affected areas are big and small. The degree of poisoning also varies, but no one has died yet. But in the future, we might have to be extra careful when we leave the base. Lin Feng sighed, feeling tired when he said this. Lin Xiao looked at him and said calmly, I think even without these new changes, we still have to be extra careful with the zombies and mutated plants and animals. Now the danger level has increased by 1 level, but it's still full of danger. Generally speaking, for our situation, we only need to guard against natural crises, if we get rid of the zombies. Lin Feng followed her words and thought about it. Well, maybe it was because the harvest from this mission was not good, and many people were injured. The situation was gloomy, which made him feel a little gloomy. He was taking things too seriously. All right, you can go back and rest. Lin Xiao smiled at him. After Lin Feng left, Lin Xiao asked Xin Yuzhen to find Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying. This time, Long Xiantong is going to Lake Tai. The two of you should follow him. You have to go to the secondary sect to experience it. The main force is also people from Sea City. However, for your safety, I will also send people to protect your lives in secret. Lin Xiao looked at the two girls and said, she would send Lin Kuei and 2 level 1 kings to lurk around the team and attack when there was any danger. Lin Wenwen looked at her speechlessly. It's not that far, just over 100 kilometers. Long Qingying was expressionless. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Wenwen from the corner of his eyes. If you don't drag us down the whole time, it won't be too far. Although it was only 100 kilometers, once they left the base, there were zombie viruses, mutated plants and animals, and now there were large numbers of mutated poisonous insects. If they were not careful along the way, they would lose their lives in these dangers. Lin Wenwen could see the warning in Lin Xiao's eyes, and immediately realized that he was being too careless. His expression immediately changed, and he nodded carefully. Oh, I understand. Lin Xiao passed the team list to the two of them. Other than the two of them and Long Xiantong, there were more than 10 people following them. Lin Wenwen didn't expect to be given another mission as soon as he returned to the base. However, he could avoid the person who took the opportunity to get close to her. Hence, Lu Wan and the others were waiting for Hua Antong to get some information about the female leader from Lu Jun. In the end, there was no progress on Hua Antong's side. Lin Wenwen's people had finally gotten close to her. But before they could progress to the next step to gain her trust, Lin Wenwen had another mission. Why did she leave again? What mission is she in such a hurry for? Lu Wan's face was gloomy, and he was gritting his teeth. Lin Wenwen left very quickly this time, and it seemed to be a special mission. Her whereabouts were also confidential, so the people Lu Wan sent to get close to her couldn't follow her anymore. They thought there would be some progress, but they were stuck here again. Is there any useful information from Hua Antong? He has been with that woman for so long, but he can't get anything out of her. Why didn't I know he was a useless person? Lu Wan continued to speak in a gloomy tone. No, he said that the woman is very tight-lipped. In order to not arouse the other party's suspicion, Hua Antong didn't push her too hard. Lu Wan, I think he's right. We can't push her too hard, we have to take it slowly, the others said. We can't do it here or there. Then we can only wait for Zhuo Chun to come back and directly approach that woman. Lu Wan said in annoyance, and his eyes were a little cold. Not long after, he received news that Zhuo Chun had returned to the base. Brother Wan, Zhuo Chun really went to the hospital. When his subordinate came to report, his tone was a little strange. Didn't he want to go in anyway? Why are you making a fuss? Lu Wan looked at his subordinate strangely. No, he really went in. The subordinate couldn't think of the right words for a moment, and after thinking for a while, he said loudly, no, Zhuo Chun was really poisoned. He was sent back by his subordinates. He's still unconscious right now. I heard from the hospital that he might have been poisoned by a mutated worm, and we don't know when he will wake up. After saying that in one breath, the subordinate immediately shut his mouth and looked at Lu Wan nervously. Lu Wan. What? Poisoned? He was dumbfounded and didn't know how to react. However, his brain had already reacted and started to think quickly. Then, he thought that if Zhuo Chun was poisoned and unconscious, then he wouldn't be able to approach the female leader. If he didn't go, did he have to send someone else? Lu Wan thought about the others, and then he thought about himself. Lu Wan raised his hand and rubbed his hair with a toothache. He was older, so the female leader didn't like him at all. The others were either plain ugly, or had no temperament or aura. The female leader didn't like them either. What the hell was going on? Chapter 888. Lin Xiao looked at Elmar amusedly and said, So Zhuochun is lying in the medical ward and won't wake up? Elmar nodded and said, I heard that his condition isn't good. I don't know if he will wake up, or if he will remain unconscious. Fortunately, his life isn't in danger. I just don't know if the medicine used to maintain his vitality is enough. How is it not enough? It's just to maintain his bodily functions. The medical department won't be too troubled. Lin Xiao smiled nonchalantly. Although they had found a lot of usable equipment in the medical center of the base, there were fewer and fewer drugs. Due to the lack of raw materials, almost all the medicinal herbs were mutated. This time, Lung Xiantong didn't just go out to find the stone that could suppress berserk. He also went out to look for medicine. However, the medicinal herbs now weren't the same as before. In a world where mutated plants were everywhere, they could only look for mutated plants with special value. From another perspective, mutated plants weren't all harmful to humans. Some were poisonous, but medicine had 3 parts of poison. It was medicine only if it was used in the right place. However, Lin Xiao had been providing energy lake water to the medical department. The other bases lacked medicine, but Lin Xiao only lacked some special medicinal herbs. At least her lake water could stimulate the human body's natural self-healing system and restore bodily functions. I'm still waiting for Zhuochun to approach me. Alright, I haven't even made a move, and he's already digging his own grave. Lin Xiao shrugged and looked a little regretful. Elmar looked at her curiously with her green eyes. You seem to be looking forward to it. Lin Xiao smiled. I've already made preparations. I was just afraid that he wouldn't come. But now he really isn't coming. Didn't I prepare for nothing? Elmar nodded and asked again. Maybe they will send someone else. Lin Xiao nodded. Maybe, we can't rule out that possibility. Continue to keep an eye on them. I'm curious what they will do next. Luwan didn't know that they were being watched. After knowing that Zhuochun was poisoned and unconscious, the plan to approach the female leader had to be put on hold. They couldn't find a suitable candidate, so they could only suppress it for now. Although they had temporarily stopped their plan to approach Lin Xiao, they hadn't given up on the cultivation base. I only promised to give you information on our leader. I didn't promise anything else, Hua Antong said with a cold smile. But you haven't given us any useful information. Your progress is too slow. Lu Wan's expression was cold. He wanted to know something about the cultivation base from Hua Antong. But Hua Antong didn't give him any face at all. Although Lu Wan had heard from the other workers that the plantation was in Wushan, the people he had sent there had never returned. He knew that the security there was very tight. However, after the second outbreak, the base no longer organized workers to plant. So is the cultivation base still in operation? Can it still be produced? Moreover, they had received news from Sea City and other bases that all the land could no longer be used to grow normal crops. If they were planted, they would either die or mutate. There was no way to harvest them normally. You didn't say that there was a time limit, did you? If I have information, I will naturally give it to you. If it isn't within my scope, I won't give it to you. Hua Antong's expression was somewhat sarcastic. He knew what these people wanted, and he was laughing at them for overestimating themselves. They dared to have ideas on the leader of the base. They didn't even know how much they were worth. Did they really think that the female leader of the base was a newcomer? Or did they think that the base could be built because of Sea City's help? Leader Wu of Sea City had indeed helped a lot. But the people of the base also saw the female leader's strength in their eyes. If she didn't have this strength, Wu Qingyue wouldn't have cooperated with her. Hua Antong actually didn't want to accept this business, but he really did need level 5 zombie cores. He saw that the other parties said that they had level 5 zombie cores to exchange for the female leader's secret information. Level 5 zombies weren't easy to kill, so level 5 zombie cores were naturally more precious. It wouldn't be too much to exchange for secret information on the female leader. However, Hua Antong didn't want to give up this opportunity to get level 5 zombie cores. He just wasn't that persistent. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have enough points, he wouldn't have paid attention to these people. On the other hand, Hua Antong was also curious about what kind of person their female leader was. He didn't even know her name. Everyone called her Miss Lu. Hearing his words, Luwan's expression became a bit ugly. Don't you want the zombie cores? Hua Antong looked at him with a funny expression. Do you think that if I tell you the situation of the cultivation base, you will directly give me level 5 zombie cores? Luwan silently stared at him. Of course not. How could a level 5 zombie core be worth the price of a cultivation base? However, according to the situation of other bases, it was obvious that the cultivation base's situation wouldn't be any better. Right now, most of the survivors in the base were still working on the wall construction site of the second base. Only some ability users who didn't want to do this kind of work would leave the base to hunt zombies, because the things they could get out of the city were much more valuable than working on the construction site. Now, all the major bases were still buying large amounts of zombie cores or energy cores, because the energy converter developed by the base in China was to convert these energy cores or zombie cores into electricity and voltage. Therefore, in addition to the development of solar energy, the energy converter had gradually replaced the previous energy sources, such as diesel, gas, and oil. It was just that this technology was currently only available in China, and they didn't intend to exchange it, but they could exchange the machines. Haiqing had always been cooperating with China and had exchanged a lot of energy converter. Therefore, the universal base had also exchanged a lot from Haiqing. Otherwise, the current equipment to collect solar energy wouldn't be able to supply the entire base's electricity, because there were too many people. Leng Xiantong and Lin Wenwen brought Li Jing's team to Haiqing. You're also in this mission? On the way to Haiqing, Lin Wenwen looked at Kong Qingming, who was also returning to Haiqing from the universal base with them. And yes, I'm the person in charge. Kong Qingming's exquisite facial features raised into a natural smile. He looked at Long Qingying, who was standing beside Lin Wenwen with her back facing him. He didn't tell Lin Wenwen that after knowing about this mission, he was the one who took the initiative to ask Wu Qingyue to lead the team. Oh! Lin Wenwen followed his gaze and turned to look at Long Qingying, but only saw that her back was facing him, and her long hair was tied up high at the back of her head. Lin Wenwen turned back and rolled his eyes at Kong Qingming. Kong Qingming immediately retracted his gaze and looked elsewhere. Chapter 889. After Leng Xuantong's exploration team left the base, nothing happened in the base. It was just that a certain leader kept staying in someone else's base, as if he didn't need to deal with his own affairs. Lin Qiao was a little jealous that he had a leader to help him deal with his work. Fortunately, Wu Qingyue didn't do anything else other than staying in her base. She couldn't just chase him away, otherwise, it would be disrespectful. It was raining outside, and there was water vapor in the air. However, the water vapor was acidic. The rain wasn't good for the human body, and could easily make people sick. In fact, it wasn't good for the plants that didn't mutate either. At least after the rain, the crops in the base would get sick again. Fortunately, Lin Qiao's lake energy could remove this. She just needed to sprinkle the lake water on the plants before they died after the rain stopped. Rumble! Rumble! A muffled sound came from the dark sky, and lightning streaked across the sky from time to time. Rumble! Rumble! Gradually, the thunder became more intense and the lightning became more frequent. Lin Qiao sat in front of the office desk and looked up. She stood up, wearing a thin black suit jacket with a white loose skirt inside. The weather was hot, and her legs could be seen. She was wearing a pair of flat leather shoes. Now she was dressed like a businesswoman before the apocalypse. She didn't have the sharpness of a leader in the apocalypse. She walked to the window and stood up. As she walked, her lower abdomen could be seen occasionally. She stood by the window and looked up at the thunderclouds in the sky. She realized that the thunderclouds seemed to be getting thicker, and there was a sense of oppression coming from above. It made Lin Qiao feel a little uneasy. It was raining heavily outside, and the water vapor caused the temperature to drop a lot. To a normal person, it might be a little cold, but Lin Qiao didn't feel much. At this moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky. Boom! Bang! Ha! Ha! Although Lin Qiao was in the second base, her hearing was extraordinary, and she could hear sounds from a few kilometers away. Moreover, from this scream, she could determine where the lightning bolt had landed. Her heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling. It can't be. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao turned around and strode out of the door. Prepare the car. Hurry. She asked Xin Yuzhen to prepare the car. Xin Yuzhen saw that her expression suddenly became dignified and knew that she had thought of something important. She immediately turned around and trotted down to prepare the car. Lin Xiao's walking speed was very fast, but his steps were also very steady. He didn't look messy at all. Very soon she arrived downstairs. Xin Yuzhen held an umbrella over her head and let her get into the car outside the gate. After Shen Yuzhen got into the car, the driver immediately stepped on the accelerator and drove towards the car. Boom! Another clap of thunder sounded. Lin Xiao sat in the back seat with a frown. He turned his head to look out the window. It was dark outside, and the rain kept hitting the car window, then slid down along with the air. Boom, boom! Amidst the muffled sounds of thunder, Lin Xiao's car stopped beside a building. Hurry up and evacuate the people. Retreat 500 meters away from here. As soon as they got out of the car, they saw a hole in the roof of the building. Thick smoke was rising from it. She didn't ask anything and immediately ordered the people around her to evacuate the people who were running out. There weren't many people in this building, but there were still about 100 people living here. The lowest floor was where Wu Qinghua lived. Needless to say, the closer Lin Xiao got, the more she could feel an energy riot coming from the top of the building. She could also sense that this power was being suppressed by someone, but it was clear that the suppression was not strong enough. Soon, Elmar and Qiu Lili appeared beside Lin Xiao. What's going on? Did he go crazy? Qiu Lili stood on a rock next to Lin Xiao. Although she was standing in the rainwater evaporated when it fell on her body. The rain didn't wet her clothes. Elmar was covered with a layer of energy, isolating the rainwater. Lin Xiao was still in the umbrella. She couldn't use her energy to isolate the rainwater. She didn't have any energy. Let's go up and take a look. It's best to lure him out of the base. If he acts up here, it won't be good. Lin Xiao looked up at the room upstairs and said. She suddenly rushed up the stairs. The building was surrounded by tall buildings. There were no short buildings or trees. Lin Xiao couldn't jump to the top of the building where Wu Qinghua was. She could only jump about 10 meters high, but the building was 50 to 60 meters high. She could only take the stairs. She couldn't even use the elevator. Without the energy of his special ability, he couldn't even jump high. Elmar and Qiu Lili were much more relaxed. Qiu Lili directly used her wind energy, while Elmar climbed up the wall like a big gecko. But she was invisible, so no one could see her. Qiu Lili flew to Wu Qinghua's room and carefully landed on the balcony, but she couldn't get in. It wasn't because the door was locked, but because the raging energy in the room formed an energy wave. It prevented Qiu Lili from approaching. The energy wave brought along an invisible gust of wind, causing Qiu Lili's white dress and her 2 long ponytails to flutter in the wind. Her body was also pushed outwards by a force. Qiu Lili raised her hand in front of her face. She wanted to enter the room, but she couldn't withstand the force. Every time she took a step forward, she would be pushed back 2 steps in the next second. Elmar quickly climbed up, but she was weaker than Qiu Lili. At least Qiu Lili could get close to the door. But Elmar could only stand outside the balcony railing and couldn't move at all. Damn, this is bad. How are we going to lure him out? What if he got angry and flared up? Does he still have a mind? Elmar let out a strange cry with a depressed expression. She couldn't do it. Qiu Lili used her arm to block the wind and tried to look at the person in the room. She saw that the man was squatting on the floor with Wu Yueling in his arms. He was trying his best to endure something. His face was blue, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. His eyes were wide open, and his eyes were bloodshot. Lingling is still inside. She seems to have fainted, Qiu Lili exclaimed. Her words seemed to have triggered something. The energy in the room suddenly rose. Bang! The 2 people on the balcony were directly thrown out by an invisible force. Fortunately, both of them reacted quickly. One somersaulted in mid-air and immediately stabilized his body in mid-air, while the other flipped down from a building that was tens of stories high. Then, he nimbly twisted his body in midair and landed easily. Chapter 890. Lin Xiao bitterly climbed more than 30 floors before he finally reached the top. As soon as she entered the corridor, she was immediately suppressed by the energy pressure. She quickly calmed herself down and retracted her aura, relying on her body to support herself. After standing at the edge of the energy and adapting for a while, Lin Xiao immediately realized that it wasn't that difficult anymore. She lifted her legs and walked towards the door of the house. The suite was accessible from all directions because the glass windows and doors were blasted open by his energy. At this moment, Lin Xiao was holding onto the wall and stepping on the door on the floor to get closer. When she saw Wu Chengyue squatting in the living room with Wu Yueling in his arms, she was stunned and her expression changed. It seemed like he was trying so hard to suppress himself because of Wu Yueling. Wu Chengyue instinctively didn't want to hurt his daughter, so even if he lost his mind, he would try his best to avoid his daughter. But looking at Wu Yueling's closed eyes, Lin Xiao didn't know what Wu Yueling's current situation was. But fortunately, her aura was still alive and hadn't disappeared. Lin Xiao stood at the door vigilantly, although she was very close to Wu Chengyue. But the surrounding energy didn't seem to cause any harm to her. It was just that the resistance was a little strong. She suddenly didn't know how to save Wu Yueling from Wu Chengyue's crazy state. What if he went crazy and did something bad? It seemed like Lung Xuantong's previous test had deviated from their original guess. Although there were hidden dangers, it acted up too quickly. When Wu Chengyue went for the test, he said that there were no problems. Could they not let metahumans get close to children in the future? Otherwise, no one would know when these metahumans would suddenly act up. As if sensing Lin Xiao, Wu Chengyue suddenly slowly raised his head and looked towards the door. Lin Xiao looked at his eyes. The outer circle of his eyes was red, but it wasn't the kind of red that covered the white of his eyes. Instead, it was a faint blush that spread from the eyeball to the outside, from deep to shallow. The outer part of his eyeball was dark red, and the more it looked, the lighter it became. His eyes were cold and emotionless. He looked at Lin Xiao as if she was a stranger. But Lin Xiao could vaguely see that there seemed to be an unconscious defense under his cold eyes. It felt like he was protecting his child. Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. This person had already lost his mind, yet he still remembered to protect his daughter. Xiao Liqing, who was downstairs, had just returned from outside when he saw the situation in the building. The building was silent, but there was a charred spot on the roof that was smoking. It looked like an explosion had happened there. Rumble! At this moment, a muffled rumble of thunder came from the clouds in the sky. Xiao Liqing cursed inwardly and prepared to rush in. You can't go in now. Lingling is with Wu Chengyue. It'll be a mess if we go with more people. It'll be bad if he overreacts. Elmar suddenly appeared and stopped Xiao Liqing. Lingling's up there. Xiao Liqing was shocked, his eyes widening in panic. However, he did not dare to go up again. His aura might really cause the mad leader to become agitated. On the rooftop, Lin Xiao didn't dare to move after Wu Chengyue looked at him. The energy in the room was wreaking havoc. The furniture and other things were all smashed into a pile of debris. The whole room was a scene of devastation. Seeing that Wu Chengyue maintained his instincts to protect Lingling, Lin Xiao was surprised and relieved. However, she was troubled about what to do next. It seemed like Wu Chengyue would not let go of Lingling of his own accord. Just when Lin Xiao thought that Wu Chengyue would not let go of Lingling of his own accord, Wu Chengyue suddenly moved. He stood up with Lingling in his arms. Fortunately, the way he carried Lingling was the same as before, and he didn't just randomly carry her. Wu Chengyue looked at Lin Xiao expressionlessly. His eyes were cold. Suddenly, he raised his head slightly and sniffed in Lin Xiao's direction. Lin Xiao looked at him. Other people's eyes were crazy, but when it came to him, why was his gaze so cold? Even Lin Xiao felt a chill down her spine when she was being stared at like this. The people at the top of the stairs moved slightly. Lin Xiao quickly put her hand behind her back and gestured for them to not move. Duan Wan immediately raised her hand and gestured for the people behind her to step back. She also moved back behind the corner of the wall. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling, who was in Wu Qingyue's arms. Her small body was limp and motionless in Wu Qingyue's arms. Her eyes were closed, and her soft long hair was scattered messily behind her. He was less than 3 meters away from her, but Lin Xiao could not sense his thoughts, nor could she see anything from his eyes. After thinking for a while, Lin Xiao tried to say, "You don't want to hurt Lingling, right?" Her voice was calm, and even a little soft. Perhaps Wu Qingyue still had a trace of his instinctive rationality. Otherwise, he would not have suppressed his energy. As expected, after hearing what she said, Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed. He looked at her hesitantly and blankly. It worked. Lin Xiao was happy. She continued to say softly, "Put Lingling down. You will definitely hurt her if you keep staying with her." However, after she said that, Wu Qingyue's gaze immediately became a little guarded. He looked at Lin Xiao with a kind of distrust, as if he was looking at a liar. Lin Xiao, who felt like she had become a liar, was speechless. However, in order to lure Lingling away from this human-shaped energy bomb, she could only pretend to be a liar. "Put her down. I will leave with you. I won't hurt her. Don't worry. If you don't leave, you will be the one who will hurt her. Do you want Lingling to die?" Lin Xiao stared at him. The last sentence was a little hard. Wu Qingyue's eyes showed a struggling expression. Clearly, he could understand Lin Xiao's words. However, he could not control what he wanted to do. Lin Xiao persisted and said, "If you don't want to hurt Lingling, put her down." The struggle in Wu Qingyue's eyes became more intense. However, he loosened his grip a little. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed. She repeated, "If you don't want to hurt her, put her down." Wu Qingyue finally looked away from Lin Xiao. He looked down at Lingling in his arms, and then looked up at Lin Xiao. It seemed like he wanted Lin Xiao to promise him. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Put her down. Otherwise you will regret it." Wu Qingyue began to bend down. He looked at Lin Xiao from time to time. After confirming that she would not come in, he slowly put Lingling down. Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. At that moment, Wu Qingyue, who had just put Lingling down, suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Lin Xiao. A wave of violent energy came crashing down. Lin Xiao's heart was alarmed. She reacted quickly and retreated. In the end, she was still a little too slow. She felt her neck tighten, and a strong force locked her neck tightly. Chapter 891. Bang! The window at the end of the corridor was smashed open. Lin Xiao was sent flying out of the window by Wu Qingyue's grip on her throat. Lin Xiao, who couldn't breathe, didn't have much of a reaction to Wu Qingyue's grip on her throat. However, Wu Qingyue was using a lot of strength and was tightly gripping her neck. Her body wasn't weak, so Wu Qingyue couldn't break her neck even if he wanted to. When she flew out of the building, Lin Xiao grabbed the arm of the hand that was gripping her neck. Then, she flipped her body and quickly wrapped her legs around Wu Qingyue's shoulders. Using his body to turn around, she skillfully let go of Wu Qingyue's hand. After her neck was freed, Lin Xiao quickly kicked Wu Qingyue's chest and flipped away. Lin Xiao's movements were very fast. The two of them separated in midair. When they landed, Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were separated by more than 10 meters. When Duan Wan and the others saw Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue fly out of the window, they immediately rushed into the house to carry Wu Yueling and quickly left the place. After Wu Qingyue landed, Elmar immediately turned invisible and sneaked behind him. However, as soon as she went behind Wu Qingyue's cold face immediately turned around and stared at Elmar. Elmar's heart skipped a beat. Fuck! Could he sense her? On the other side, after Lin Xiao landed, she quickly retreated. Her current combat strength was too low, so she wasn't suitable for a fight. Anyway, with Elmar and Xiao Lily around, she could retreat a little. Not to mention for the little man in her stomach. Even if she recovered to her previous state, she wouldn't dare to fight Wu Qingyue head-on. However, just as Lin Xiao retreated a meter, Wu Qingyue suddenly turned around and stared at her. He didn't care about Elmar, who was behind him. His figure flashed and flashed toward Lin Xiao again. Lin Xiao was shocked. "Oh my god! Why are you staring at me again?" She quickly turned around and rushed out of the base. Fortunately, although her energy was gone, she still had her speed. She could still run and jump very quickly, but this was just as well. Since Wu Qingyue had his eyes on her, she could lead him out of the base. Rumble. Wu Qingyue's figure kept chasing behind, and the thunder above his head immediately began to follow his position. Although Lin Xiao was not slow, Wu Qingyue was faster, because he still had the energy of his special ability that he could use. Elmar, who was behind them, did not dare to get too close. After all, Wu Qingyue's energy waves were no joke. Wherever he passed, the buildings and the debris on the ground were all sent flying and shattered into small pieces in midair. However, the lightning in the sky did not fall for a long time. Although everyone was on tenterhooks, they were also relieved at the same time. Everyone was speechless as they watched Wu Qingyue chase after Lin Xiao. This leader Wu had already lost all rationality, yet he was still chasing after their leader? Was there a need to give up so easily? No one present was a match for Wu Qingyue. So now, they could only rely on their leader to deal with this crazy lightning ability user. Seeing Lin Xiao lead Wu Qingyue out of the city, they thought there was a way to get him outside and subdue him. However, they did not know that Lin Xiao, who was quickly dodging left and right to avoid Wu Qingyue's attacks while moving out of the base, was currently in a very difficult situation. She could only lead him outside, and then directly enter the space. However, they did not know where she would run to after coming out of the space. Just as Lin Xiao was about to lead the person who was about to start the lightning attack outside, Wu Qingyue, who was behind her, pounced a few times but failed to catch her. He appeared to be a little irritated. Boom! Bang! A moderate lightning descended from the sky, but it only struck in front of Lin Xiao and did not strike her. Lin Xiao, who was moving forward, looked up at the sky. Then, without looking back, she quickly stepped on the edge of a nearby building and used the force to jump forward in the blink of an eye. She did not know if Wu Qingyue still had a trace of rationality left. Although the energy around his body was chaotic, it did not attract the lightning in the sky. While Wu Qingyue still had a trace of rationality, Lin Xiao quickly lured him out of the base. The soldiers at the gate of the city, while only saw a figure rushing over at a speed too fast for the naked eye to follow. Then the figure jumped onto the roof of a car and jumped out. Then he jumped onto a telephone pole and directly jumped onto the wall from the telephone pole. This time, they saw a little more clearly. It seemed to be a woman. However, they could not see clearly who it was. They only saw the hem of her clothes and flying long hair. Then she disappeared from the top of the wall. Then, another figure rushed up the wall with a violent energy and chased after the woman in front of it. When Lin Xiao flipped from the wall to the outside, she did a flip in the air and landed lightly on her feet. Then, as soon as her feet touched the ground, she immediately rushed out. As soon as she left, a figure immediately flew over. The violent aura directly passed by Lin Xiao and landed in front of her. Lin Xiao's expression did not change. She suddenly turned to the side to avoid Wu Qingyue's figure and continued to rush to the side. When she turned to the side, Wu Qingyue quickly reached out his hand to catch her. His action was actually an instinctive reaction. Instinctively, he wanted to catch the woman in front of him. The woman's body had a very pleasant smell that attracted him. However, not being able to catch her made him feel irritated. He wanted to catch her. He wanted to get her. He thought, what should he do after catching her? Eat her. After all, she smelled very good. However, her smell was not the smell of food. He did not want to eat her. Wu Qingyue's mind could not think about these problems. He only instinctively wanted to catch Lin Xiao. Catch her. Catch the fragrance on her body. However, this woman was too good at running. Like a loach, he could not catch her no matter how he tried. The more he could not catch her, the more he wanted to catch her. His heart was inexplicably occupied by the thought of hunting. Wu Qingyue could only drive his body according to the simple thought. In the isolation zone of a few hundred meters, Lin Xiao was chased by Wu Qingyue. She dodged left and right and finally managed to jump out. She quickly rushed into an alley in the safe zone. Not far enough. Too close. She was still too close to the base. At least she had to leave the safe zone. As Lin Xiao thought about it, she turned around to look at Wu Qingyue who was behind her. However, when she turned around, she saw that the person was already in front of her. Fuck! Lin Xiao was shocked. Her body instinctively took a step back. Then, she bent her upper body and immediately dodged Wu Qingyue's hand. At the same time, she used both hands to support herself on the ground. She turned around and kicked Wu Qingyue's shoulder. Chapter 892. After kicking Wu Qingyue away, Lin Xiao jumped up and quickly jumped from the top of the building. After being chased by Wu Qingyue for such a long distance, Lin Xiao finally realized that he had no intention of hurting her. Otherwise, a few bolts of lightning would be enough to destroy her. She also knew that Wu Qingyue was still suppressing his own energy. If he really exploded, the scene would only be like before when Mo Yan went berserk, with lightning striking down everywhere. Wu Qingyue's expression grew colder and colder when he saw Lin Xiao dodging his attack once again. His gaze was so cold that it became somewhat tyrannical. He suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Xiao's departing figure. The moment Lin Xiao's body left the safe zone, he disappeared in a flash. In the next instant, he appeared in front of Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao was rushing forward when Wu Qingyue's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. At this moment, it was too late for her to stop. She could only subconsciously turn her feet and use her strength to move sideways to avoid Wu Qingyue. But in her heart, she knew it was too late. He could only enter the space. Wu Qingyue quickly hugged the air with both hands. The woman in front of him suddenly disappeared without a trace. He froze for a moment, then immediately turned his head to look around, and found that the woman's aura had also disappeared. Even the fragrance that had captivated him was becoming fainter and fainter, as if it had lost its owner. After discovering that the person he was chasing suddenly disappeared, Wu Qingyue's expression suddenly changed. The energy in his body instantly went berserk. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. Several bolts of lightning descended from the sky and bombarded the area where Wu Qingyue was. Everything within 100 meters was blown to smithereens. On Wu Qingyue's incomparably handsome face, his ice-cold eyes were now filled with a violent intent. The energy around his body spread out chaotically and began to rise higher, causing the clouds and thunder in the sky to resonate. Rumble! The thunder in the sky was getting louder and louder, and the clouds were getting lower and lower. The pressure brought by the thunderclouds was also getting weaker and weaker, making people feel suffocated. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, splashing onto the ground. Dust flew in all directions. Rumble! Wu Qingyue's surroundings were the center of the lightning storm. Lightning energy violently exploded in all directions. Wu Qingyue straightened his back and stood there motionlessly. However, his eyes were no longer cold. Instead, they were filled with madness. At this time, Lin Xiao, who was hiding in the space, did not know that Wu Qingyue had become violent because of her disappearance. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly running into the space, Lu Tianyi looked at her strangely, because Lin Xiao looked a little embarrassed. "What's wrong? Are you being chased by a dog?" Lu Tianyi ran to Lin Xiao and asked curiously. Lin Xiao subconsciously squinted his eyes to look outside the space, but all he saw was white fog. She opened her eyes, looked at Lu Tianyi and said, "It's almost done, but this dog is a bit powerful." Alright, Wu Qingyue's current state was more or less that of a mad dog. What about your dog? In any case, it is a level 6 zombie dog, and its fighting strength is not bad. Why don't you call it out and have a dog fight? Lu Tianyi said with a smile. He thought what Lin Xiao said was true. It might be a mutant dog, or some other mutant beast. Lin Xiao glared at him. One can't beat him. That was a level 8 metahuman, a lightning type, and also in a berserk state. Wang was only a level 6 zombie beast. If he went out, he would only be abused. But soon, Lin Xiao was not in the mood to care about him, because Wu Qingyue was now in a berserk state, who had the ability to knock him out. Even getting close to him was a problem, let alone knocking him out. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao frowned. Although she had lured Wu Qingyue out of the safe zone, she did not know if he would run back to the base. Thinking of bringing the lightning from the sky to the base, Lin Xiao's head began to hurt. But according to the situation of the berserk metahumans, when they went berserk, they did not seem to move casually. Even if they moved, it was because there were targets around them. If there were no targets, they would stay in the same place for a long time. Seeing Lin Xiao frowning, his expression became serious. Lu Tiany's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and asked, "It can't be? This mad dog is very powerful? Even you can't deal with it? Do you still need to hide here to avoid it?" Lin Xiao looked up at him and did not say anything. But with this look, Lu Tiany had already guessed what she meant. Obviously, he was right. He had guessed correctly. He did not know that at this time, Lin Xiao no longer had any energy and her strength had been reduced by half. Looking at him, she was worried that Wu Qingyue would not run back to the base. Lin Xiao could not stay in the space any longer. "I still don't feel at ease with him. I'll go out first." After saying that, she flashed and left the space again. Her vision blurred and she looked around again. Sure enough, it was another unfamiliar scene. She did not know where she had gone. But fortunately, she was still in the city and not in the wilderness. She hurriedly looked for the surrounding road signs and city signs. After a while, she found that she was still in Hangzhou City. But she had run from the upper city, where the base was located, to the lower city. With a wave of her hand, a car was released. Lin Xiao immediately got into the car and drove back to the base. And on the other side, at the moment when she appeared from the space, Wu Qingyue, who had been standing still, suddenly turned his eyes and stared straight in the direction of the lower city. He seemed to have found something. The violence in his eyes seemed to have weakened a little, and he was a little hesitant. After a while, Wu Qingyue turned around and moved unhurriedly in the direction of the lower city. He seemed to be not sure if the target was there, but his instincts told him that it was there. It seemed that something was leading him there. Lin Xiao did not know that as soon as she came out, she immediately attracted the attention of Wu Qingyue, who was 20 or 30 kilometers away. She did not expect that he would be so far away. Unexpectedly, she could still attract his attention. After Lin Xiao's breath disappeared, the other people in the base looked at each other in confusion, because Wu Qingyue's frenzied breath did not disappear. Elmar said, "Maybe. What if the leader has no other way?" After all, Leader Wu is also a peak level 8 ability user, and he is also a thunder type. Very powerful. In fact, everyone thought so. Yuan Tianxing, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked in the direction of Wu Qingyue's breath and did not say anything. If even their leader had no other way, then they were even more helpless, because with their strength, they could not get close to Wu Qingyue. If even the leader has no other way, we can only watch from the side, Duan Wan said helplessly. But at this moment, Wu Qingyue suddenly began to move. He was moving in the direction of the lower city. Chapter 893. Hey, he's gone, Qiu Lily said in surprise. Xiao Liqing and the people from High City all looked confused and uneasy. After thinking for a while, he said, "No, we can't let our leader go on like this." Although they couldn't do anything about it, they could still follow and watch. Therefore, he led the people of Sea City and directly jumped down from the wall and had someone drive the car out of the base. They drove the car out of the base and followed Wu Qingyue. Even if they couldn't stop their crazy leader now, they had to watch him. They also had to prevent others from taking advantage of him. With Wu Qingyue's invisible speed, it only took him 10 minutes to travel 20 to 30 kilometers. The closer he got to the downtown area, the faster he went. Because he felt Lin Xiao's aura, he immediately sped up. Not long after Lin Xiao left, she suddenly felt Wu Qingyue's aura coming from afar. No way! Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked in that direction with some surprise and uncertainty. Boom! Then she saw lightning and muffled thunder coming from the sky. Lin Xiao's expression changed. She immediately turned the car around and rushed out. Many of the main roads in the downtown area had been cleared by the people who came to collect supplies. Therefore, Lin Xiao drove without any hindrance. The car rushed out of the city onto the highway and quickly ran in another direction. It didn't matter which direction it was, as long as it wasn't to the base. That man actually caught up with her so quickly. How long had it been? She came out of the space less than 10 minutes ago. Even a dog's nose couldn't be so sensitive. Feeling the familiar energy aura getting closer and closer, Lin Xiao frowned. Did she have to hide in the space again? Although she didn't come out from the same place every time. The distance was not more than 50 kilometers away from the last time. She was already 30 kilometers away from Wuxia now, but he could still sense her direction. It seemed meaningless to go back into the space and come out again, unless she didn't come out. But that couldn't be done, because she still had to go back to the base. After thinking about it, she couldn't think of a foolproof way. She couldn't knock Wuxia out in his current state. What should she do? Anyway, in order to prevent Wuxia from approaching her base, she couldn't go back. Meanwhile, in the base, their leader ran out again. The affairs of the base were temporarily taken over by Yuan Tianqing. He was a little speechless. Lin Xiao had just returned not long ago. Why did he run out again? At this moment, one of his subordinates came to report to him. Deputy Leader, Swordsmanship is awake. Yuan Tianqing's eyes turned cold when he heard that. He looked at him and said, "Oh, didn't you say that we don't know when he will wake up? You woke up so soon?" The subordinate continued to whisper. Although he's awake, he still can't move. The doctor said that the toxins in his body had not been completely cleared, and his whole body was in a state of nerve paralysis. I really don't know when this will be over. You can't move? Paralysis? Yuan Tianqing's eyes flashed when he heard that. His whole body was paralyzed and he couldn't move. Wasn't that the same as an old man having a stroke? In that case, it would be impossible for him to get close to the leader. No one knew when the leader would return. In fact, the reason why they were in the mood to play games with them was because they wanted to collect important evidence so that they could fiercely counterattack. Otherwise, the other people had brought so many people to join their base. If they chased them out for no reason or accused them of crimes without evidence, the other survivors in the base would also be frightened. The other survivors in the base will also be frightened, and it will cause people to feel uneasy, making them think that they are not safe in the base. Since they had built this base, it was definitely to let the survivors live here in peace, and not to live in fear and anxiety. If that was the case, the survivors would probably give up on this place soon. Right now, the other party was only halfway through their operation, and they had only collected half of the evidence. It was not enough to kill the other party in one blow. Okay, I got it. Continue to keep an eye on him. Be careful not to be discovered. Yuan Tianqing nodded. The subordinate responded cautiously and left. On the other side, Lu Jun met Hua Antong in the cafeteria almost every day. You seem to be very free recently. Lu Jun looked at him and asked in a strange tone. Do you have a purpose for looking for me? For example, to keep asking about the leader? When Hua Antong heard that, he laughed and said, You finally saw through me. Actually, I was afraid that if I said it directly from the beginning, you would reject me. After saying that, he stared into her eyes with a hint of love in them. Lu Jun was stunned, and a strange light flashed in her eyes through the contact lenses. She looked at him in surprise and said, It can't be what I think it is. You. Her reaction made Hua Antong happy. There was no disgust, and no disgust, which meant that he had a good chance. He looked at her happily and nodded. Yes, I like you. But I was afraid that it would be too abrupt to suddenly look for you. So I used those excuses to get close to you. I don't know if you are willing to be with me in the future. Moreover, I will also treat Tong Tong as my own child, unlike his father who treats him like my own child. Lu Jun hesitated and looked at him with a slight frown. The surprise in her eyes hadn't faded yet, and she struggled to say, But you don't have to give me an answer right now, okay? I know you may be very confused right now, so I am willing to wait. When you calm down and think it through, you can tell me. Hua Antong quickly interrupted her. Lu Jun really didn't know what to say this time. She looked at him in silence. After a while she sighed and said, Okay, that. I will think about it seriously. With that, she carried Tong Tong, and hurriedly turned around to leave with the umbrella. No one saw that her expression was a little cold under the umbrella, as if she wasn't the one who was surprised and helpless just now. Hua Antong watched her walk away in a daze before turning around and leaving. He couldn't suppress the joy in his heart. After fishing for so long, the fish had finally taken the bait. "Mom, I don't like that uncle." Tong Tong, who was lying in Lu Jun's arms, suddenly straightened up and looked at Lu Jun. Lu Jun stopped in her tracks and looked at him in surprise. "Why doesn't Tong Tong like him? Does he not treat you well?" Actually, every time Hua Antong came, he would bring some fun toys for Tong Tong. However, Tong Tong looked scared and didn't dare to accept his gifts every time. Tong Tong looked at her silently. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. He just murmured, I just don't like him." With that, he pounced and hugged Lu Jun's neck again without saying a word. Lu Jun smiled at her son and continued walking forward without saying anything. Chapter 894. Zuo-chun regretted it after he woke up. He didn't think that he would be poisoned on this trip, and he almost couldn't wake up. He pretended to be injured and stayed in the hospital to get close to that woman. In the end, he really needed to stay in the hospital, but that woman didn't come to the medical department anymore. And he was already paralyzed. How could he get close to her? Thinking about his poisoned body, he didn't know when he would regain consciousness. Zuo-chun suddenly felt hatred for Lin Xiao. If it wasn't to get close to that woman, why would he go out on this trip? If he didn't go out and pretend to be injured so that he could stay in the hospital, he wouldn't have been stung by a group of poisonous bees. It was all because of that woman that he ended up like this. Zuo-chun didn't think that it was his fault for accidentally touching the poisonous bees, but he pushed all the blame to Lin Xiao. If Lin Xiao knew what he was thinking, he would probably throw him into the beehive. Are you kidding me? It's fine that I'm in the medical department, but that woman isn't in the base now? Then did I get poisoned for nothing? Zuo-chun lay on the bed, his pale face gloomy. His lips were pale because the poison in his body hadn't been completely removed. He had a handsome face, but his sinister expression and morbid complexion made him look like a ghost. So what if she's in the base? You can't move now. You can't get out of bed or walk. Even if she walks past your door now, you won't be able to touch her. Lu Wan sneered at him. He was obviously unhappy with Zuo-chun's attitude. He couldn't help but despise him for not being able to handle such a small matter. It was fine if he pretended to be injured. It was normal to get injured when hunting zombies at the end of the world. But in the end he was poisoned. And it was a deep poison. Hearing Lu Wan's words, Zuo-chun's face became even gloomier. Before the two of them could say anything, the subordinate outside knocked on the door and came in. It's time for the injection. Zuo-chun and Lu Wan both shut their mouths and watched the female nurse walk in with the medicine. Ever since a group of women came, the medical department's care workers had been replaced by female nurses. On the other side, Lin Xiao hadn't been driving on the highway for long when she sensed Wu Qingyue's presence. She immediately jumped out of the car before he arrived and put the car into her space. Boom! Wu Qingyue descended from the sky, and the sound of thunder followed his arrival. Lin Xiao couldn't understand why Wu Qingyue was still so obsessed with her, even though he had lost his mind. She couldn't feel his killing intent, so why did he have to capture her? What did he want to do? Perhaps even Wu Qingyue himself did not know the answer to this question. Suddenly, Lin Xiao's mind flashed as he thought of a problem. Since Wu Qingyue didn't want to hurt her now, could she let him catch her and see what he was going to do? Because this might give him a chance to get close to him. Maybe he could directly knock him out by getting close to him? Because of this thought, Lin Xiao hesitated. Then, in the environment where lightning struck down, one hand grabbed her arm, and the other quickly locked onto her slender neck. The moment he grabbed Lin Xiao, the energy around Wu Qingyue's body calmed down slightly. The lightning bolts descending on their heads also gradually disappeared. The surrounding grass, trees, and the guardrails of the road were all struck by lightning and fell to the ground. Because of Wu Qingyue's aura, the surrounding mutant beasts and mutant plants all hid and avoided him. None of them dared to approach this area. After discovering that she was being held, Wu Qingyue's aura calmed down a little, and Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. However, the fact that he was grabbing her neck made her very unhappy. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue's eyes, and saw that they were still cold and emotionless. His face was also expressionless. The redness in his eyes shrunk and expanded, and the energy around his body also changed along with the strange redness in his eyes. Lin Xiao stood still, waiting to see what Wu Chengyue was going to do with her. He had already lost his mind, so what would he do? At this moment, Wu Chengyue suddenly lowered his head and stretched his nose over, smelling from the side of Lin Xiao's face to her ears and the side of her neck. Seeing Wu Chengyue's zombie-like actions, Lin Xiao was somewhat at a loss. Was there a smell on her body? She only had the smell of zombies on her body, right? But looking at Wu Chengyue's expressionless face, he seemed to be smelling very enthusiastically. Lin Xiao's face was filled with question marks. However, regardless of the smell on her body, the first thing she had to do was to sneak attack him when he wasn't paying attention. Thus, Lin Xiao quietly raised her left hand that wasn't being grabbed and prepared to move it towards the man's neck. However, just as she raised her hand, Wu Chengyue suddenly lifted his head from her neck. Then he looked at her with a pair of emotionless eyes. Lin Xiao. She suddenly realized that when this man wasn't smiling, his eyes were actually very beautiful. Perhaps it was because the distance between their faces was very long. She could see his long and narrow eyes. His eyes, which were originally as black as ink, now had a circle of red, as if he was wearing contact lenses, giving him a strange sense of beauty. Also, his eyelashes were very thick and long, and the curvature of his eyelashes was also very perfect. Usually, this person always had a smile on his face, or his aura was too strong for people to notice his eyes. Just as Lin Xiao was suddenly attracted by Wu Chengyue's eyes, Wu Chengyue released the hand that was strangling her neck. Then he put his hand on her left hand. With her left hand suddenly being grabbed, Lin Xiao suddenly realized what she was about to do. Her heart skipped a beat, and she thought that Wu Chengyue had discovered what she was about to do. Wu Chengyue stood there and grabbed Lin Xiao's hand. His other hand slid down from her shoulder and grabbed her other hand. Then he didn't do anything, and just stood there while holding on to her. Lin Xiao looked left and right, and tried to move her hands. Sure enough, although Wu Chengyue didn't look like he was going to hurt her, his grip was very tight. Seeing that the other party obviously didn't do anything else, Lin Xiao felt helpless. Could it be that she was going to stand here with this man and do nothing? Also, why was this person chasing after her so persistently? She looked up at the sky. The rain was still pouring, and she and Wu Chengyue were already drenched. Although she wouldn't fall sick, she didn't know if this man would. It didn't seem like he would either. The other party's energy was in a mess right now, but he was instinctively protecting his body. The dark clouds in the sky were still very thick, but the thunder and lightning were much quieter. However, the faint sound of thunder still rang out from time to time. After Lin Xiao finished looking at the sky, she lowered her head to look at Wu Chengyue. Then, she suddenly thought of something, and looked at the sky again before lowering her head to look at Wu Chengyue. It seemed like the thunder clouds in the sky were showing this man's emotions. When he was chasing her just now, he was clearly very violent. Now that he had caught her, he had calmed down. Chapter 895. Looking at her shackled hands, Lin Xiao was confused. She had to think of a way to free her hands. Otherwise, how could she sneak an attack on this guy? And how long was he going to stand here for? Lin Xiao looked at her wet clothes, which were stuck to her body, and felt uncomfortable. She glanced at Wu Chengyue, and then looked left and right. This guy was crazy, but after catching her, he just stood there and did nothing. Lin Xiao took a step back, and slightly distanced herself from him. However, as soon as she moved, Wu Chengyue followed her. This reaction was a little interesting. Seeing that she had stepped back, Wu Chengyue didn't pull her back and just followed her. Lin Xiao was stunned, and then tentatively took 2 steps to the side. Sure enough, Wu Chengyue only followed her for 2 steps, and didn't react anymore. At this moment, Lin Xiao thought that he wouldn't react anymore. Wu Chengyue suddenly lowered his head and stuck his nose over, sniffing at her neck under her ear. Lin Xiao thought, so after losing your mind your instincts become dogs? However, Lin Xiao realized that the more Wu Chengyue sniffed, the calmer the energy on his body became. The energy storm that had spread more than 10 meters away gradually shrank to within 2 meters of the two of them. After the rain hit Wu Qingyue and drenched him, the energy didn't help him block the rain. Lin Xiao moved her head slightly, wanting to keep Wu Qingyue's face away from her. However, the more she moved, the lower his face became. His hot breath hit her neck, although Lin Xiao didn't feel anything on her skin. However, she felt weird, especially since he was still in this position. Although she was very aware of his approach, Wu Qingyue was no longer conscious. He didn't do anything with any hidden motives, and only acted on instinct. This made Lin Xiao accept it more, and she didn't feel so conflicted. Since he didn't intend to do anything, she could only find a place to hide from the rain. Lin Xiao slowly stepped back, wondering if she could slowly take this person away from here. She couldn't agitate him, lest he went crazy again. However, when Lin Xiao moved, Wu Qingyue immediately raised his head. He looked at Lin Xiao coldly, his eyes still emotionless. It made people think that he was angry, but they weren't sure. Lin Xiao stopped in his tracks to see if he would get angry. However, Wu Qingyue just raised his head and stared at her, then straightened up. He even let go of one of his hands, leaving only his left hand holding on to Lin Xiao's right hand. Ha! Lin Xiao looked at his hand in surprise, and then looked at his other hand that had been released. This reaction was different from what she had expected. She raised her head and looked at Wu Qingyue's eyes carefully. She found that the redness in his eyes had faded a lot, but the expression in his eyes was still the same. Lin Xiao moved his leg and shifted his position. Then he looked at Wu Qingyue's reaction. Sure enough, he only tightened his grip on Lin Xiao's hand and remained silent. She simply pulled him to the side and saw that Wu Qingyue was just following her with a straight face. After thinking for a while, Lin Xiao brought Wu Qingyue into the space. He didn't know if he could use the power of the space to suppress Wu Qingyue. If it didn't work, then he could only bring him out. Lin Xiao brought Wu Qingyue and directly appeared in the space forest. The surrounding atmosphere immediately became oppressive. As if feeling threatened, the aura around Wu Qingyue immediately soared. It immediately formed a wave of air that shook the forest. Whoosh dash rumble. A burst of thunder immediately sounded in Lin Xiao's space. The zombies outside the forest were suddenly suppressed by the powerful aura and the pressure of the thunder and lightning energy. They all looked at the forest in fear. Lu Tianyi frowned. He was also suppressed to the point that he couldn't move. But he was somewhat familiar with this aura. Wasn't this Wu Qingyue's aura? It was fine that Lu Tianyi brought him in, but what was with this wave of air? Moreover, Wu Qingyue's aura was very violent, completely different from before. Mo Yen, who was in the room upstairs, was also frowning. Although his corpse core was damaged, his aura was not weaker than Wu Qingyue's. So Wu Qingyue's energy wave and aura did not affect him much. It was just that the chaotic feeling in Wu Qingyue's aura proved that Wu Qingyue was not normal at this time. This feeling was similar to when he had gone berserk. As someone who was also of the lightning element, no one understood better than him the chaos and uneasiness in the thunder at this moment. He didn't know why that female zombie brought Wu Qingyue in this state. Wasn't she afraid that he would accidentally blow up this space? Or could it be that this female zombie's space was so powerful that it could suppress a level 8 thunder-type psychic? Lin Xiao didn't know whether she could suppress a level 8 thunder-type psychic, but she did suppress a level 8 psychic before. Seeing Wu Qingyue suddenly erupt, Lin Xiao quickly took a step back, raised her free hand and pressed down in Wu Qingyue's direction. The suppressive force of the space was immediately concentrated here, and it pressed down on Wu Qingyue from all directions. Being suppressed by the power of the space, Wu Qingyue's face immediately became ferocious. He opened his eyes and frowned. His lips that were originally tightly pursed also cracked, and he clenched his teeth to suppress the suppression. Even so, he didn't let go of Lin Xiao's hand. Instead, the strength of the grip became stronger and stronger, almost breaking the bones in Lin Xiao's hand. Lin Xiao didn't feel any pain from the tightening grip, and at the same time, she gritted her teeth and increased the suppression of the space. Because of Wu Qingyue's suppression, Lin Xiao was also struggling. She felt that she was getting out of control. However, at this time, Wu Qinghua didn't know that the threat he was feeling was coming from Lin Xiao's actions. After Wu Qinghua held on for a while, he seemed to feel that the power that wanted to suppress him had loosened a little. He fiercely pulled Lin Xiao over and hugged him tightly in his arms. In a protective manner, he resisted and protected her at the same time. Lin Xiao was confused by his action. She didn't expect Wu Qinghua to still want to protect her at this time. While she was stunned, the power in her hand immediately loosened. Wu Qinghua also took this opportunity to break free from the suppression, and at the same time, his own energy surged and spread to the surroundings. He held Lin Xiao and looked around vigilantly. Originally, when Lin Xiao used the power of the space to suppress Wu Qinghua's energy suppression, the other zombies in the space felt a little better. But in just a few seconds, they felt that Wu Qinghua's energy suppression suddenly increased. Lu Tianyi, who wanted to run far away from here, ran 2 steps, and immediately became stiff and couldn't move his legs. He couldn't help but want to roar at the 2 people in the forest. If you want to play, can't you go outside to play? They are scared to death, okay? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.